Hello everyone, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well as always. Errant Vice, thank you so much for the 20. That has put you on the full track to get that stream of Signalis. I'll need to look into that. I looked at like a bit of a trailer, but it seemed like it could be a bit spoiler heavy, so I just have the vaguest of impressions. So I will get back to you at a time where I'll do that, just because I will, do a couple lore streams at the very least before transitioning back into that. But thank you so much for the 20. I appreciate that. And the total hundo, you madman. Speaking of madman, I got my dog. He is being feisty still. All right. So aside from that, Dave, Captini, Mortis, Teen Sith, Operator, welcome on back into the streams. So for anybody who is coming into the streams fresh or, watching the VODs fresh, I'm Last Protagonist. I like to look at the lore of FromSoft games. I also like to compare the English and Japanese text. And the purposes of these lore reaction streams are to kind of get a read on what the larger community is thinking, broaden my horizons, see what I can agree with, disagree with, what we can take away. Because doing these kind of streams has definitely helped open my eyes as to what topics I think could still use a bit of coverage. So I've made some videos as a response to this. So I think it's just kind of a greater experience for the lore community in general. So that way, like my streams have also allowed me to collaborate with other creators. And I think it just overall better for the lore community when we get these kind of collabs going. And speaking of which, I'll need to get in contact with Zafe to see if he wanted me to wanted to join in on the reacts or something like that with the Moxie stream and whatnot. So, all right, what is on the docket for tonight? So after having finished our playthrough of Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, and I forgot to talk to Trina at the very end there, very like me, I actually haven't watched the official launch trailer because it came out like the day right before the DLC launched and people were like, oh my god, there's so many spoilers. So I was like, okay, I'm going to avoid that. So this will be like my first impression of that trailer. And of course, now that we know all the lore and stuff, it won't be that big of a deal. And then after that, I thought it'd be kind of cute and neat to look back at my very first impressions of the lore for what's called the Shadow of the Erdtree announcement, with just like the picture of Miquella and Torrent, just to see what I was thinking back then. And I think I need to adjust my UI for this because I think I have it set at like 100% rather than like the 200 that I need. All right, so after that, I figure we could check out the Shaman and the Hornsent Elden Ring by Honored Madman, which has been a recommendation. And then I'm really interested in Messmer, a deconstruction of Villainy. Because funnily enough, I was thinking about making a video about Messmer today. Well, caveat to that, whenever I say that I'm thinking about making a video, I'm like, oh, I kind of want to talk about this. But there's a big divide, a big gap between thinking something would be neat to do and actually following through with it. So don't get your hopes up, and depending on like how good Fat Brett videos is, I might not really be as inclined to do that anymore. But yeah, just some of my thoughts became a little bit more solidified when doing the playthrough about like him being abandoned by America. So I'm very interested in this. And then depending on how much time we have left, the DLC that split the Souls community in half by Evan Explains. So that is what I've got on the agenda for tonight. So, Enter Y, Ask Next, FEMA. How's it going? Melina is Torrent. You heard I was super stinky? Well, I am a madman, aren't I? And then Enter Y, I watched one yesterday, Merrick equals the Glowmide Queen. Is that the new Zafe video? I'm interested in that. Because a lot of people were talking about that on the Discord. Maybe to say like a lot is a bit too much, but the discussion has made its rounds a bit. No, some more dislike the Messmer video. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and start off the night with that launch trailer just to see what all I missed out on by skipping this. And hey, Tony, nice to see you again. And then let me know how the sound balance is for you guys. That's annoying. It's buffering, even though it's lying to me. Alright.
My loyal blade.
Is this one of the ones where I have to, like, minimize again? Oh no, it's just actually having a moment, huh? There we go.
And champion of the festival. Both your deeds will ever be praised in song.
So we get the Shadow Keep and the Miquella quote.
Is there no hope for redemption?
The Blorbos?
The answer, sadly, is clear.
This is annoying me. Okay, and now the sound's desynced, I think. Why is it when I stream that this happens? Could have happened to me any other time in the world. Now let's take it out of theater mode. Right. Is it because it's on auto? Yeah, that's probably it. Right, I'm gonna stick to 1080p, and so hopefully it'll just like stick to one track rather than trying to figure things out. So I'm gonna back up. You don't recommend being a low-equipped load bow only the first time through the DLC? Well, I was a zero blessing boy, so I had my own time dying a lot. Teen Sith finally has a decent handle on the DLC. Nice. I'm still interested to hear your thoughts on the timeline there, if you didn't think it was that big of a deal. Is it just this video? I'm gonna refresh, because this is just silly. This is a lie. It's not going at all. Oh boy, chat. Right when we came back to our frenzied return, we really have gone frenzied, haven't we? Party time? Zero Blessing Boy is the new maidenless? I mean, you technically kind of are maidenless at that point. Zero Blessing was how you did Baal. Your god afterwards, how you caved in. Yeah, Baal kind of broke me too. Bro, what is going on with this? If like 480p isn't even working, I'm just going to blame the video and then move on. This is... Well, that's different.
My loyal blade. And champion of the festival. Both your deeds will ever be praised in song.
Is there no hope for redemption?
Is it just me, or does this like look sped up?
The answer, sadly, is clear.
Well, obviously the quality is terrible, but... That's super loud. Let me turn that down a bit. Seems a little bit loud for you guys. So we got Curseblade Hornsent. It's a cool angle. Mitchell, of course.
The mere sight of your blade sets my heart aflutter.
And that had to have been really exciting, seeing the Fire Knight and like that, because he looks way cooler than he actually is. I mean, they look cool, don't get me wrong, but you know, they're just enemies.
Grass.
The Trina.
The Erdtree is my people's enemy. By Marika long betrayed, set aflame.
Oh yeah, so that line about the Erdtree is my enemy, betrayed by America, set aflame. I think it's a little bit clearer in the Japanese that he's not saying that America burned the Erdtree as much as it is like the same subject should be understood as referencing his people, because I could see how that line can be a little bit confusing. But with that being said, I do think there is a really good possibility that America would have burned the Erdtree and whatnot. Or, well, I don't want to get into that right now, but I'll just leave that alone. After doing sorcery, Dex feels like a total breeze. Nice. Yeah, Ramina's music. Oh, they even showed him breaking his eye. That sucks. That's a huge kind of spoiler. The Dragon Priestess. Ymir.
The fog that vexed my aging faculties has been lifted, and folly is better left.
Okay, so they show off Rolana in her boss arena rather than just the Messmer Black Knight that we saw in the story. No, the first trailer.
Shall he haunt me once again?
Wait, what was his dialogue? His faculties were... Oh, that's a pretty big spoiler. Hold on.
Faculties has been lifted, and folly is better left to he haunt me once again.
Such as it is, this
That looks
could
super
not
cool,
be
though.
more fitting. For the birth of a new god and the coming of a lord.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad I skipped over this trailer, because I had the joy of like wondering what the hell exactly Bale was because of that ghost talking about him. Like, ooh, what's Bale? And just like knowing it would have been this guy. I mean, he still looks cool as hell the way they showed him off, but you know, the suspense is half the fun, at least for me. Triggered by Bale, thanks. Triggered by the pixels. Oh god, this looks awful. So the good news is, if you want to run a tarnished player character build, the Greatsword is on the table. I thought that was the Ancient Meteoric Ore Greatsword for a second, and I got super hyped, and then I realized.
Promise me you'll be my consort.
Damn, they really did that? Okay. Yeah, that was pretty intense. I mean, it kind of, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter the most, like the day before the DLC releases. But, I don't know, I have conflicted feelings about it, because it's like, then why release anything at all when the hype is already there? And it also sucked that there were a lot of spoilers beforehand. But, yeah, I guess I should like go back into my Discord to like the very early spoiler days to see what people were saying, because I moderate it, you know, very gently. Let's say I got spoiled on certain things, like hearing that Radahn was the final boss and seeing Rolana's name, and just seeing the name Rolana kind of killed a lot of my enthusiasm. It just I felt it was pretty bad even by Miyazaki standards for names. Operator said, the Bale reveal in this trailer reminded them of the Dragon God's intro in the Demon's Soul cinematic cutscene. Oh yeah. In terms of how hyped you got. Mortis had a hell of a night fighting Bale. Egon talking crap made it worse for FEMA, so you didn't summon him for a few rounds. Galaxy Dragon wonders if there's a lore reason they always use the Raging Wolf set in all the trailers for the Tarnished, like it's our canon set, or maybe it's because of how popular it is. So, at least for Dark Souls, they always used the Elite Knight set, so I think that's just kind of their always stand-in character. But then again, they also show off a couple of the set classes, and at least for the network test, there was the Raging Wolf as the starting class, and you could cosplay as Vargrim essentially. But aside from that, they often show off like the Traveler set, which is like the Roderica stand-in, the Prisoner set, and you'll also see the Karian Royal Knight occasionally too, and I think that was also a network test class, so that's part of it, I think. Bale barely got to phase transition? That's wild. You love Bale's fight even with the major flaws. He was built up so well in the DLC, it actually blew Mortis's mind. I think the run up to Bale is magnificent, with the exception of Senesax, because Senesax is just an ancient dragon. You fought enough of them already, and that one's just extremely tanky for no reason. I think it technically has more HP than Bale. I could be wrong about that, but I think I heard that. And it's just a little bit awkward to me that they don't give you more lock-on points for an ancient dragon, whereas you have like foot lock-on points for the modern drakes and stuff. I think it would just be nice if they were more considerate about some of that with some of their bosses. And FEMA cheesed Senesax. I don't blame you. I mean, like, some of the more optimal strategies seem like cheesing almost, like the hit and run strat that I employed on my DLC playthrough. All right, so I'm gonna go, you know what? No, I'm not gonna like it just because it pissed me off with all the spoilers. It was really stressful doing the day beforehand. But I mean, I like the idea of the trailer, just not how they did it, I guess. All right, so now to take a walk down memory lane, we'll check out my first DLC announcement coverage video. I don't even remember what I said. It's a quick 3-minute video just to either laugh or be like, oh man, he was cooking. But all right, here we go. I also thought about checking out other people's videos on this topic, but I didn't want to necessarily come across as like dunking on anybody else or beating a dead horse by looking at pre-DLC content. So hey Mercy, nice to see you again. Here we go. If you haven't heard, Elden Ring DLC, The Shadow of the Erdtree is official. Alright, this quality's pissing me off. Hopefully on my own video, we can watch it. If you haven't heard, this seems fine. Elden Ring DLC, The Shadow of the Erdtree has officially been announced. I can tell I did this video extremely quickly because of how echoey my mic is and everything. There's no official release date as of yet, and there's no further information beyond an image that's been shared on their website and official Twitter page. This has already sparked a tremendous debate. Was this before it was called X? Within the community as hype ramps up for additional Elden Ring content. On a golden field of grain, we have a lone rider sat side straddle on a spectral steed, possibly Torrent. In the distance, the Erdtree looms, towering over all, but compared to the Erdtree we see in-game, this one is charred black and has another trunk coiling around it. Sap is also coming out of the Erdtree, so it raises the question of when the DLC is supposed to take place in the timeline. We know the Erdtree flourished with sap during the Age of Plenty, and that the cardinal sin is burning the Erdtree, so it's possible this could be a kind of prequel to the main story of the game, and the figure on the spectral steed could be that of Marika. The funny thing is, like, even now I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on. So it is kind of funny that we just talk about like the cardinal sin constantly, and I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about Marika allegedly burning the Erdtree, but I mean, here we are. However, upon closer examination, the rider's golden braids more closely resemble those of Miquella's. Thanks go to Latana on the Discord for sharing this image. If Miquella is indeed the rider, it might help explain the appearance of the Erdtree, since the trunk coiling around it is reminiscent of the double helix seen in the Halig tree, or even the cross tree tower shield. Hey, my favorite. It's still not a 1-to-1 match for the Halig tree, but based on Miquella's affiliation with Saint Trina in dreams, it seems entirely possible that the DLC will take place within a dream, which would help explain how the Erdtree appears the way it is. And so I was thinking about this earlier today. Oh, it looks like I'm boosting a bit too much. Let me turn down my mic volume, so hopefully I don't go too high for you guys. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Okay, yeah, it definitely looks better. So, yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today, that the Shadowlands being a kind of death adjacent land is interesting, but they must not have really been that way to begin with, but I don't want to go down that route for now. But with Trina's powers of sleep and whatnot, it is kind of strange to me still, even now, that he needed Mohg's body to enter the Shadowlands, if it's related to death, and if like sleep is supposed to be adjacent to death. There are a lot of like small things that I think they could have like done to tweak the story to make it wind up in a better place, in my opinion, but hell, what do I know at this point? And then, hey, what to do, fam? How's it going? When will we be able to wife up Miquella? You could try to share his bloody bedchamber with Mohg. It was all a dream. Now things start to make sense. Yeah. Yeah, so this was the screenshot with Miquella in the past. I don't know if it is supposed to be the past, and if it was the past, that brings up even... No, that doesn't make any damn sense that there's no buildings. I just kind of don't take this promotional concept art as being like canon, because it just doesn't make sense, because the Crusades most likely happened before Miquella was even born, which raises the question of how the hell are there like no buildings or anything in that vast field of grain. So it's probably just more of a teaser than anything. Yeah, the promo image isn't literal. When did Miquella give Melina torrents? Good question. It's because Miquella is Melina. Some other things of note are the spectral gravestones strewn about the landscape. They have the kinds of holes in them that are seen throughout Castle Morn and the Altus Plateau, so if by some chance the DLC doesn't take place within a dream, it would mean there's been a massive shift in the landscape. The angle for the Erdtree that's been showed should roughly line up with the smoldering wall and Calum ruins, and we should still see Leyndell on the mountaintops of the Giants, but they're conspicuously absent along with the Divine Towers. I think this might work out, because a lot of people have theorized that the Shadowlands would have been over here, like between that spot, and some people have wondered whether or not the Jagged Peak extended into the Caelid region, but obviously the way we see the Shadow Tree is even way further back, so we should be even further to the south, relatively speaking, as far as perspectives goes. And I'm not talking that based off the Miquella image. Well, I mean, even that one, yeah. But relative to how far the Shadow Tree appears in the game. If for whatever reason it's on the opposite side of the Erdtree, it would be on an inaccessible part of the map somewhere between Dominula Windmill Village and the consecrated snowfield. And yeah, so that was just thinking about what if the image was kind of mirrored, I suppose, which I still need to play around with the maps to see what I think could fit together, and I'm probably not going to do that, but just lament it every stream. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time prepping for this stream by like redoing some of the arts and stuff. Why does it keep saying ads inserted? Are you guys getting like spammed with ads? Because that seems like the fourth one, and you guys probably can't even hear me if there are ads playing. Anyway, Sarcastic, nice to see you again. And Leon Highwind, you're pretty sure Torrent isn't the only one of his species? Yeah, when we go into the... I always forget what it's actually called, the specimen storeroom. We can see other gigantic torrent-like creatures as well. Every time I post a silly meme theory, a lore tuber gets a new idea. Of course they do. They me. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I say is kind of memey, is like said with a grain of truth, in that like this might be plausible. Let's entertain it a little bit, even if I am like mostly joking. But I don't think that was super memey. Or are you just talking to chat in general there? It could be to drive home the Ranni Miquella connection that was expanded upon in the DLC. That we're Ranni's lord, and then Miquella is looking for his own lord. Yeah. Talking to the chat, that makes sense. Or are there big Hornsent peoples? What do the numbers mean? I wish I knew, bro. If anything, it might show that the horns are super ancient if they grew on like giants. I've wondered if that's supposed to be like the giant crucible type stuff, but a lot of that stuff just doesn't make the most sense to me. Either way, nothing quite lines up with what we can find in game, So it seems more likely that this is either a completely new landscape or one that was altered by a shattering level event. Or both. I also tried looking into the ruins in the background, and while the arches look similar to the top of the 4 belfries, or the arches found in the Precipice of Anticipation, they aren't the same, and in my quick look I was unable to find an arch in the game that has the same 6 figures shown in the promotional artwork. This makes it seem even more likely that the DLC is going to take place in a completely different environment. So what do you think the DLC is going to be like? Has the community already figured it out? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. The stupid ass questions that I ask to just try to get a little bit of engagement in the comments. Yeah, guys, we figured it out way back then. Actually, though, for real, you know, to pat myself on my back here, I think the pretty grounded take of like, well, this is what we can make out of this very limited amount of information. I think it actually held up pretty well to the test of time, all things considered. In the comments below. And if you want to discuss more lore, feel free to join the Discord server. The link is in the video description. Once again, I'd like to thank my patrons and channel members for their support and help keeping this channel alive. Fear the old lore. Thanks guys, appreciate that. And thank us all for watching again. Hey Jack Irish, nice to see you again. Who plagiarized whom with 1,000-Year Journey, Miquella or Ranni? Good question. Actually, you could make the argument that Ranni would be plagiarizing Miquella because you would need to complete his quest line. Well, he does call you the Lord of the Old Order. It's so annoying, man. They plagiarized each other. It's like Newton and the one Indian. No, who's the other calculus guy? Or wasn't it also discovered in India separately from those two? Hopefully you guys know what I'm talking about. And then Little Church Lord, nice to see you again. It's been a minute. Leibniz, right? Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so it's trying to tell me the ads are going to run again. What the hell is going on? Let me look at this real quick. I even have it set on conservative. So if you guys are getting spammed with ads, I don't know what I can do about that. But let me know if you got ads. It's okay, you do Twitch. Well, it's fine if you guys get ads like every once in a while, but this is like the third or fourth time already, and it's not even been like a half hour. And I have it set on like the most conservative setting because I kind of hate ads, and you know. Anyway. Let me know if you guys have gotten like multiple. Okay, so Mortis has gotten none. So it says for some viewers. So maybe they're just like sending them out in waves. That's interesting. All right. Hey, like and sub. No, I'm not going to like my own video. That feels a little bit too much even for me. All right. So next we'll actually dive into some more of the actual DLC analysis with Honored Madmans, Those Who Came Before video about the Shaman and the Hornsent. So I think this might be one of, if not the first, like DLC video that got recommended to me by like Minds Patch. So this must have been like one of the very first DLC lore videos out there. June 27th. When did the DLC release? The 21st. So damn, it wasn't even a week and my mans was already trying to spit some truth about the lore. Yeah, it just takes me a long time to go through the text, and honestly, like, I could have made my Hornsent video a lot earlier, but I was having some difficulties trying to get my script all sorted out. I think it was for the better of that video to hold off and release it in the state that I did, because I don't think my second and my first drafts were good enough, and they're a little bit too speculative in parts that I didn't want to be. So, hey, Santeria 1911, nice to see you. Okay. Thank you, Little Church Lore. Appreciate that. All right, let's go ahead and dive on into his video. Oh, yeah, I should turn on subs.
Long ago, Queen Marika commanded Sir Messmer to purge the Tower folk. A cleansing by fire. It's no wonder the Hornsent holds the Erdtree in contempt.
I might turn it up.
Man is by nature a creature of conquest, and in this regard, the Tower folk are no different. They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war, but it's still a wretched shame.
Alright, welcome back to Honored Madmen. I hope everybody's doing well. In today's edition of Elden Ring Lore Shadow of the Erdtree edition, we're going to be talking about the antique race of people known as the Hornsent, the horned folk of Ballarat Tower. These scorpion-eating fellows' hatred of the Erdtree and all things of its ilk is so intense that it lingers on their armor pieces. For example, the Cursed Blade mask and the Horned Warrior helmet, which causes its wearer to become nauseated with the blessing of the Erdtree, reducing the effect of crimson and cerulean flasks, but ultimately not by much. We're also going to go into...
I couldn't help but enjoy the cut issue of having the...
which causes its wearer to become nauseated with
border.
the blessing of the Erdtree, reduing the effect of
Just
crimson
shrink
and
in.
cerulean flasks.
Stuff like that can happen really easily while you're editing and not paying the closest of attention. So, as to whether or not the resentment lingers directly on their armor, I get what he's saying with the nauseating thing, but I don't think I would agree with that fully. I think it's kind of a different thing, even though I think overall his point is mostly on track, that the Hornsent are indeed vengeful folk, and it'll tie into things that way. I think the reason why they get nauseated by the Erdtree's flasks of tears and whatnot is because they're kind of drawing from parallel sources of power, which may be incompatible with each other, is my headcanon for now.
Flasks, but ultimately not by much. We're also going to go into how they're connected with the Omen from the base game and the Fell Curse and even the Fell God. So the Hornsent are the people of the Land of Shadows before it was the Land of Shadows. Their capital, for lack of a better term, seems to have been the Ballarat Tower settlement, and while this capital was the main place the Hornsent lived, they had other smaller settlements all across the map. So the average Hornsent person appears to be just like any other human, but with a crown of little thorns coming out of their head. Just regular little devil horns, not unlike the horns found on the formless mother uplifted Albinaurics. Although the Albinaurics have them on the top of their head, and the Hornsent seem to have them more around the outer circumference of their head.
Oh yeah, and that's something I meant to put into my last video about the jar scent and whatnot. I even got the footage of the red Albinaurics, but forgot to actually put it in because I thought other footage worked there for what I was talking about, but I think it would have been better if I had made that connection a bit more concrete in my own video. So, yeah, I do kind of agree that I believe that these Hornsent folk aren't that different from normal people, and as I pointed out on my lore through, not all Hornsent even have horns when you look at the dudes who help the manflies, or the kind of shades in the specimen storeroom, and even the weird little noble dudes in the Shadowkeep don't have horns on their heads, I believe.
Now, there were some Hornsent that were born with these crowns of tangled mass of horns, essentially, which in many ways evoked their divines, or their divinity, which we can see hanging from the specimen hall. So when a Hornsent had these giant tangled horns, they were viewed as, a sign of the divines. But it also came with a divine responsibility as well. It was their destiny to become sculpted keepers, the highest of which, or the highest prestigious order of sculpted keepers, of course, was the lion dancers, those allowed to use the lion puppet. Aspiring ones can be seen as the horned warriors patrolling the Ballarat settlement. They were basically the underlings of the puppet keepers, if you will. And failed sculpted keepers were known as the Cursed Blades, and they were...
So, I don't think he's entirely wrong, but I also don't know if their true goal was instead to try to become revered tutelary deities and to transcend the world. And arguably that would probably, I think I'll say that more forcefully. I do think that's their goal, and they may have practiced divine invocation with lion beasts and bird beasts to take a step on that path, even if that would eventually get them where they truly wanted to go.
Were still revered, they weren't hated or seen as pariahs or anything like that. They often served as guardians for old crypts, and their dancing skills were, legendary. Look at these guys move. And obviously their martial dancing prowess wasn't good enough for them to become lion keepers, but that don't make them slouches. And they can still be found throughout the Shadow Realm to this day in old Hornsent ruins or the Tower of Bellerat or ancient Raoul ruins. They're quite uncommon nowadays though. And it could be because as revered and accepted as they were, the tide eventually turned against them. After which a good portion of them was imprisoned in jails, at least Liberth and Mira were. Others seem to have evaded this, or perhaps just weren't rounded up with the others. Until like yesterday, I thought that the Cursed Blades were also chopped up and put inside the jars, and that's why we couldn't find any more of them in the jails. Mainly because they share the same white hair with the main body and those fleshy mounds that reside in the jars. Sure, we don't see any horns in that mass, but it's entirely possible that they could have the horns excised before they're put with the rest of the meat. I also
So yeah, the Cursed Blades were imprisoned underground before the Crusade happened, but they either broke out or were let out to fight Messmer's forces, which is interesting in and of itself. And that also fuels my suspicion that the reason they were imprisoned is because they were cursed, rather than revered tutelary deities or like sculpted keepers or something along those lines. And then Fema asked, did I notice all the monumentals? They're from Demon Souls? Yeah, I was talking about that on the lorethrough quite a bit, and I have wondered whether or not those monumentals are like visually thematic references to Demon Souls in the way that they kind of imprisoned the old one, which was a beast, and whether or not the monumentals in Shadow of the Erdtree were used originally to perhaps keep something like the Elden Beast at bay as well. Exactly. And as Little Church Lore says, in this context, divine invocation is similar to any form of mysticism or contemplation. It's a means of union or making contact with the divine. Or more colloquially, I guess we could say just like shamanism, where they come into contact with the souls of the dead, or perhaps animism. Although shamanism, I guess, is more direct about like the death connections there.
Found the long white hair to be notable, as it's also found on other horned beings such as the Omen or the Ancestral Followers. But that doesn't appear to be the case. I mean, maybe a couple of them got thrown into a jar. Regardless, these frozen jar production facilities were not the place you wanted to end up if you were anybody. So, sidebar, since we're talking about the jails again, let's go on what's called a tangent regarding yesterday's video. So I really wish I would have found the Shaman's Village before recording that video I posted yesterday. I didn't realize how important the word shaman was going to be in this DLC, as my only encounter with it when I recorded that video was the Bonnie Village ghost and the Tooth Whip description. But after visiting Shaman Village, it's like, yeah, the shaman are 100% the Newman. The minor Erdtree incantations description and the golden braid pretty much confirm that Marika grew up in the Shaman Village, which I would say more than proves that Newman equals shaman, but I don't think the jar treatment was exclusive to the shamans. They were definitely the main ingredient, but personally I think the Hornsent potentates of Bonnie Village began rounding up everybody from humans to blood fiends to shamans, even their own damn kind from the look at some of those ghosts at Bellerat Jail. Basically anybody they could get their hands on to make the jars and stick them in those jails so that they could become quote-unquote saints.
And I think that is pretty fair also because of just how many damn pot type recipes there are in general, that they must have done a number of experiments to have so many recipes for us to learn them, rather than us just like sticking random stuff in a jar to make specific recipes. Oh, thinking about it that way, that would be kind of cool, like a little bit of experimentation and like learning things that way. Anyway, you've been getting a real kick out of seeing blind reactions to the jar reveal, bro. If you could like make a compilation, or like, yeah, that'd be really cool to see now that you mention it.
Of course, the shamans as a main ingredient of this fleshy gumbo given their divine properties, and to legitimize them as saints, they use the other bodies as filler meat. According to the description of the Toothed Whip, shaman's flesh was said to meld harmoniously with others, which I think more or less confirms this. It would also explain why the shaman host is able to assume direct control of this fleshy mass of innard meat, while also retaining some of its original form. I just like the idea that the Hornsent were this extremely brutal, alien-esque race that I think would be more than willing to put its own people into jars right alongside these foreign interlopers, aka the Newman, in a way exploiting the divine properties of the...
Part of me wonders if the sound was deliberate or if he just forgot to edit it in the rush to get the video out. What was I going to say? So they definitely put their own folk into the jars, and that's made a bit explicit with the innard meat descriptions.
Newman, so that they could quote-unquote manufacture saints. Anyway, though, moving on, there are a number of different types of Hornsent.
Nah, my man just forgot the sound.
So obviously there's the NPC Hornsent that we meet, and he appears to have been a potentate for Bonnie Village, which we just talked about the jars. What these guys did was they were in charge with chopping up the individuals who were to be put in the jars. And they're known for wearing this mask, which is made up of hardened, dried up caterpillars, held together by what appears to be a raggedy hood. And aside from Hornsent, the NPC, we can also see this mask worn obviously by the potentates. So it's safe to assume that's where he came from. And there's the average Hornsent person, which again is just like the average noble wandering around the lands between, except with a little circle of horns around his head. Yeah, they have access to different incantations. Their casters have this spiral that rises from the ground they can summon on you. The larger versions of these ghostly revered spirits carry large cleavers, not unlike the cleavers wielded by the Misbegotten, so perhaps there's a connection there. Maybe Misbegotten are a result of human and Hornsent intermingling, or maybe it's just like the Curse of the Omen, presumably brought about by the intense resentment and anger that the Hornsent as a people held for America and the Erdtree.
So I don't necessarily feel that way about the Hornsent and the Misbegotten specifically, but I don't really have problems with these kind of claims because Honored Madman does a good job of making it clear that this is conjecture on his part. It's where he's like using a language like maybe this, perhaps that. So that's gets a pass from me. I was gonna say something else, but I think I lost it there. Let me. Oh, yeah. So about the Hornsent NPC, I hate that his name is just Hornsent, because I have to, like, specify that it's the Hornsent NPC, or, like, the Hornsent of Lada's group, etc. I don't know if he was from Bonnie Village, despite having the caterpillar mask. It almost seems like the potentates there took a Hornsent ritual specifically, and were implementing it for their own uses. So it could have been something customarily done by a group of Hornsent or something along those lines. But anyway, I would just say with him talking about like his mother and child and like getting the soup from Empyrean grandma, that he probably could have been a Bellyrat guy. But anyway, Scaleezy, nice to see you again. More lore, welcome back as always. You're not trying to sound mean, but does this guy sound like he's drunk to anyone else? I think there could be a couple components to it. He sounds like he's from like New England. I don't want to like say where exactly. So that accent can be a bit more difficult for people to parse. He's also speaking extremely, well, maybe not even extremely casually. He's just speaking casually. He's not doing the YouTube algo game of speaking slowly and enunciating his words. So now that I'm like being more cognizant of it, I might slow down, because I probably should do that, because not everybody who watches my content is a native speaker of English, and I do get requests to slow down even on my videos where I slow down quite a bit. So setting all that aside, at the end of all of his videos, he does a send off with a bong rip, so that might also be part of his shtick, that he's essentially just giving his ideas. And maybe I spoke a little bit too quickly there, but I'll just speak it a bit more slowly now. He's sharing his ideas. So yeah. And then Mike Bailey, welcome into the stream. You think in a lot of his videos, yeah, okay. You think he takes a bong hit first. Yeah, so I think that is also the implication by the final one at the end of them. And then Tad Wrong, nice to see you again. And Dave. Wait, no, Dave was here way earlier. Okay.
There's also a number of large Hornsent corpses with the divine crown of tangled horns, sitting in a meditative-like pose across the Shadow Realm, easily familiar to all of us as the places where revered spirit ashes are recovered, the description of which refers to them as those who came before. Now, some of these corpses lack a head, perhaps they crumbled, or maybe, just maybe, some of these were Newmen and they've had their heads removed in a similar manner to all of the statues of America in the Lands of Shadow. And if so, maybe the heads were even removed to throw in jars. Anyway though, now there were certain revered members of the Hornsent race, like these cursed blades, known for wearing these golden ornate masks affixed with a tangled, gnarled crown of horns. These individuals set out to be sculpted keepers who were the wielders of the lion puppet, for example, but they failed, and instead chose to be temple guardians and ascetics all across the lands of the Hornsent, until a good amount of them were imprisoned in the jails. Presumably around the same time, the Hornsent locked away the Lamenter, essentially the face of their god that they were so ashamed of they buried deep below ground, and then presumably began to fear. I mean, the Lamenter was probably just some regular Hornsent guy who happened to find a stone mask with horns, you know, the Lamenter's mask, and when he put it on...
I was just thinking about a JoJo reference. So I don't think the Lamenter is their kind of god, but I think... I don't remember how much I talked about this on my stream, but I think what's going on with the Lamenter... Oh, no, I do remember looking for it. Is kind of similar to the concept of insight in Bloodborne, in that... truth is often indistinguishable from madness, and the Lamenter kind of hit on that truth and accepted his pain and took it as a form of rapture, which allowed him to like transcend the absurdity of real life, which makes him appear mad to others. And if you're a sane person, you can't really accept the premises of what the Lamenter would offer, so you're either forced to come face to face with the possibility that like life and death and the world are profane and absurd and accept it rapturously, or you just kind of resist it and throw away your problems underground, which is what I think they did. But yeah, making the JoJo reference is pretty funny, though. Your favorite characters in Elden Ring? The Hornsent? Yeah. Yeah, more lore. He's definitely mixed up a few things, which is why I wanted to check when this video was made. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass on this video because it was made 6 days after the DLC released. So, that's why I'm just trying to correct what I can. So, I definitely understand doing the algo game, but it's not a play that I would make trying to release videos before I'd even completed the DLC and seen everything.
It turned him into one, which resulted in all of the other Hornsent being like, well, what the hell are you? And as we know, the Lamenter looks like an omen, for lack of a better term. Horns coming out of even the most uncomfortable places. And yeah, perhaps this horrified the Hornsent. Maybe even they started to become ashamed of their horns. Another one you're likely to encounter either at Bellarat Tower Settlement or the ancient ruins of Raoul would be the Horn Warriors. These guys do not know the word stagger. Yeah, they can be dropped to a knee if you hit them with a couple heavy attacks, but they don't ever stagger, for me at least. They're known as the keepers of the tower, and they wield these really cool curved swords, either paired or great. And they're highly proficient in the art of horn calling, which, as seen here, is pretty self-explanatory.
Which is kind of weird that they're... I made a mistake of looking back at the video. Trying to back... Okay. It's kind of weird to me that these are reminiscent of horns. I guess you could kind of see them like sticking out the back. They're like asymmetrical and stuff, but the overall shape of the blade is pretty blade-like, I guess. And I guess in many ways, this is almost like an inversion of the Omen's Merc blade, whatever it's called. Although, of course, you could argue it's really the Omen's Merc blade that would be the inversion of this. But anyway. Hey, Florge Borge, Zordier, nice to see both of you again. A comparison between Elden Ring and Morrowind would be fun. Yeah, but then you would need to learn all of Morrowind's lore, and I've already got enough problems keeping the 4 FromSoft Soulsborne games lore in my mind. I don't count Sekiro because it doesn't have lore. It just has mythology. So, Sortier is asking whether or not the Lamenter has a face growing out of its back. Have I noticed this? Yes, it's definitely been pointed out. I'm a bit skeptical about it. I think this is like one of those Rorschach type tests where you can definitely see a face if you want to, and you could leave your friends behind, because if your friends don't face, I'm going to leave this joke behind. So, I think it's just probably like a weird protrusion of their spine, because you can kind of see similar type things coming off the backs of the Blood Fiends, although they're different in their own right, and that might just be something that's a byproduct of whatever the heck's going on with them.
Proficient in the art of horn calling, which, as seen here, is pretty self-explanatory. The Horned Warriors are essentially the elite fighters of the Hornsent. And while their number is few nowadays, they're still extremely deadly combatants and would give any of Messmer's knights a run for their money. And come on, what a great design they have. There's also a Hornsent grandma. And yeah, she'll only converse with you if you're wearing that lion head, but she can become a prime source of scorpion soup, which is the traditional cultural dish of the Hornsent. Of course, now since the age of the Hornsent has long since passed, this soup has lost a bit of its potency and even its warmth, but it still packs a punch, much like the Hornsent NPC. Which reminds me, you can actually give the Hornsent NPC one of these soups and he'll say basically what I said, that it's just not the same. Which again, it makes sense. He's this extremely resentful Hornsent who feels the full weight of everything Messmer did to his people. But as Needle Knight Leda says, they weren't saints, they were just on the losing side of the war. But I guess it makes you wonder why. Why did Marika have the Hornsent put to the sword? Well, I guess the simple answer was because they were turning all of her people into living jars, or again, at least a main ingredient for the living jars, and it could also explain why Marika brought the practice to the lands between. Maybe that's why there's all these broken up jars by the Erdtrees, that the Newman in the jars are just trying to be reborn by the grace of the Erdtree.
So, alright, we all ready to get mad and set chat on fire again? So, going back to that whole idea of rebirth, why practice rebirth if death isn't a thing? When were the Hornsent jarring the Miko of the Shaman village and whatnot? I honestly think it would have been before Marika's reign, and I don't have a good reconciliation of why Marika would have waited to get revenge, other than, like, you know, amassing more power. That could be part of it. But that could also, like, tie into why the Hornsent NPC feels as though Marika betrayed his people. So, regardless of one's position on the removal of destined death and whatnot, I still think that the possibility of rebirth is a little bit awkward to talk about, because despite everything, Renala has given herself to the grim art of reincarnation and seeks to birth people anew, even though death should have been removed, which is weird. So maybe that ties into the break of her psyche, but big doubt on that one. I don't know. It's just kind of messy. So just wanted to mention that as a possibility to keep in mind, is to, like, how you may think Destined Death fits into the timeline of the DLC and Sealing the Realm of Shadow. Since it's a lore head of Elder Scrolls, but not to the point where we'd want to actively make content. I mean, even if you make the I almost said cross-cultural, cross-content, I'm certain there'd be some people that'd be interested, although maybe that's a bit rich coming from me, because a lot of people don't like my cross-content. Anyway, I mean, my channel's pretty small anyway, all things considered, so talking about my Bloodborne X Final Fantasy VII video might not be the best of comparisons to make. But yeah, you know, just get a huge audience first, and then some people will watch it. And then Goddess Baguette is not familiar with the discussion. The removal of death happened when the Golden Order formed, right? You just assumed that was after the events of the DLC. I'm not sure I follow what you're saying. When do you think the Golden Order was formed after the... Well, when do you think is after the events of the DLC? So, we've got two main possibilities as to when the Golden Order was formed. With the first being when Marika and Godfrey began the Age of the Erdtree, as it's called. And then the second one could be when Radagon ascends the throne of Elden Lord, or around that general time between the transition of Godfrey to Radagon. But maybe there's a third option now with like the proto Erdtree days. But if Marika removed death way early, then what the hell was the point of transitioning away from, like, the Golden Order into Golden Order fundamentalism? I don't know. That's kind of my hang-up. But, okay, if she did it way earlier, then why make the Erdtree would be a question. Yeah, that's how it should be. Could she have done it to fight the fire giants? I don't know. All right, Fema, thank you for dropping in, and you have a good night, and hopefully you feel better. Morlor wants my opinions on when the Golden Order was formed and when Radagon came to be shifted since the DLC. Oh, no, I see what you're asking now. I just misread it. Okay, so they haven't substantially shifted, to be honest. So I still tend to think that the most likely time, or maybe the most convenient time based off the bits of lore that were given, it would make the most sense to me that death was still removed around the Radagon time frame. And just to give like a quick flippant answer, which you shouldn't take too seriously, and, you know, take this with a huge grain of salt, is that I think it's very interesting that there's almost nothing calling out the Golden Order explicitly in the DLC, whereas like everything in the base game pretty much always associates it with fundamentalism, which is associated with Radagon. But I do not think that the absence of evidence is evidence in and of itself, which is why I'm saying don't take this seriously. You're going to get confused with another key event? Okay. And then, Boric, nice to see you again. The Golden Order seems to be used generally, and also Radagon's fundamentalism, maybe because Radagon's is the latest form of the faith. And that is a possibility as well. And then Tad asks, didn't Marika learn how to grow the Erdtree from the fingers? It's technically ambiguous, because the seed talismans say, like, these things were thought to not have existed. Perhaps it harkens back to the age of like the two fingers or something like that. So they just leave it open-ended. But generally, we don't have enough reason to fully discount that idea. So kind of. So there's just a bit of an asterisk there, because even with that information, like, how do the two fingers even get the Erdtree seeds? Is that something that they're like that is within them? Are Erdtree seeds at the core of these fingers and whatnot? It doesn't make sense, but I mean, if all of the two fingers came from Metter, and she has nothing to seemingly do with Erdtrees or the Elden Beast, like, just what the hell is going on? And then Teen Sith said that she thinks that the Golden Order itself is a fundamentalist strain of Erdtree worship. And yeah, so I tend to equivocate the Golden Order to fundamentalism. Alright, let's go ahead and go on back to the video. If it'll load.
Could make sense. But yeah, at the end of the day, I can't think of another good reason Marika would put her most ruthless of children in charge of putting these Hornsent people to the spike. See, in my mind, it can't not be personal. But again, I've yet to read even close to all the descriptions in the game, and that's the fun thing about these first couple of videos. We'll be kind of just learning this shit together. The Hornsent NPCs that we encounter in the game all refer to Queen Marika as having betrayed them and put them to the torch. And while these sources are obviously biased and should be taken with at least a grain of salt, it still isn't clear if this persecution of the Newman people happened prior to Marika's supposed betrayal or was the cause of this betrayal. Obviously, the Hornsent are going to tell the story in a way that paints them as the victims, but they really do seem to harp on that betrayal aspect of it. Obviously, that could just mean that when the Newman showed up, the Hornsent allowed them to integrate into their society, and Hornsent the NPC was a literal potentate from Bonnie Village, judging by his mask. So I'm not entirely sure we can trust him to tell us whether, he started stuffing Newman into jars before or after Marika betrayed them, but it's definitely something to ponder over. Anyway though, back to the Hornsent. Now the Hornsent grandma, she's a really cool character, really nice old lady. She gives us the spirit of her son in the form of an incantation that summons a ghostly skull that resembles a rancor. The spirit is capable of firing projectiles that also closely resemble wraiths from the base game, and is definitely an interesting spell for the faith-oriented.
So I might be getting a bit ahead of him right now, but in case he doesn't bring it up, I want to mention that we've looked into the Wraith spell, and some people didn't think it was, the Watchful Spirit spell, and some people didn't think it was necessarily related to the Wraiths, because it is a slightly different color, it's brighter and whatnot. But the braided cord description does equivocate Watchful Spirits and Vengeful Spirits, so there might be some slight differences, but they're mostly the same or similar, which, I mean, is kind of self-evident, but there is a bit more of that concrete connection as well.
That also closely resemble wraiths from the base game, and is definitely an interesting spell for the faith-oriented. I'll give you guys the warning that my friend needed. You definitely want to go talk to her before you've beaten Messmer, otherwise you won't be able to have any dialogue with her. And that being said, if you do defeat Messmer and return to tell her, she's overjoyed at the fact and gives you a gourmet scorpion soup so you can actually see what these soups were like before the age of the Hornsent had passed. And it looks quite delicious and is described really delicious. And all that tells me is I'm going to have to do another Elden Ring food video. And so far, this is the only gourmet scorpion soup I've managed to find. It might be the only one in a playthrough. I don't know if you can give this one to the Hornsent NPC because he had invaded me right outside the Church of the Bud and got himself killed, which sort of confused me at first. I mean, Hornsent is this very interesting NPC. We already talked about him a little bit earlier on in the video, but Hornsent is essentially the vengeance and brutality of his people personified. And not only that, he's motivated by righteous justice, and his sole goal is to kill Messmer, and after he accomplishes that, he plans to take the fight to Marika and the rest of her offspring. Maybe that's why he invaded me. I'd already beaten him to the punch. There weren't any demigods left by the time I did the DLC. But yeah, I believe the last time you're able to converse with him, that's what he says, that he's going to go out.
It is strange to me that he doesn't wait to invade you until after the Radahn fight. Maybe because the devs are like, well, nobody's gonna play anymore after this fight, so that's it. But yeah, the fact that he can potentially side with Letta it still blows my mind even now. And then I thought I was gonna say something else, but oh well.
After Marika and the other demigods, her offspring. And that if redemption by Miquella means he forgets this desire for vengeance and what happened to his people, then he does not want to be redeemed. There's a lot of cool lines in this DLC. I don't know if him invading me proves Leda right that he was going to be a betrayer, but I just couldn't bring myself to side with that paranoid fanatic. But at the end of the day, though, she's not wrong. I mean, all of us effectively weren't as loyal to the cause as she was, besides maybe Dryleaf Dane. I was there to kill Miquella, Theolier was there to find Saint Trina, Frey was there to unearth Radahn's connection to Miquella, Ansbach was effectively there to avenge his Lord Mog, so maybe her paranoia was founded. I just found it.
I always forget that he says Mog like that, and then the auto captions always capitalize it. It's like they just pick up on that word. I wonder if this is something more specific that it always... why is it always capitalized? It just sends it over the edge for me.
Every other character more interesting than her, so maybe there's a bias against her. Very cool armor set, though. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Back to the Hornsent as a people. The spiral pattern is a thing of major religious significance to the Hornsent, and they have several towers built in its image. The spiral itself is described as a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods, which definitely explains the spiral towers. The design is also used in Messmer's coat of arms.
Should I read these? No, okay.
It's found in between a flame and the Golden Order ring symbol. The spiral pattern is...
I don't know if it's fair to say that this is the Golden Order ring symbol, but anyway, I digress. I think it could be like representative of Miquella. I've wondered whether or not this is Rolana's braid, because that almost seems to make the most sense, but it does kind of also remind me of Miquella's ring, I guess.
Itself resembles the pattern on the horns, the gnarled, tangled horns of the Hornsent's divinity. And those born with these tangled crown of horns protruding from their head were viewed as a sign of the divines. However, most of these babies perished in infancy. It's not really surprising when you've got horns coming out of quite possibly your eyes, ears, and brain. But we can find a number of these deceased Hornsent titans throughout the specimen hall in Messmer's Shadow Keep. Even more curious are the enlarged versions of Torrent with elements of the ancestral beast. I think it's safe to say Torrent comes from the Land of Shadows originally, and if you take a look at his horns, they've also got that spiral ringed pattern to them. I mean, he's essentially a smaller version of this beast. Now, those born with the divine horns who are lucky enough to make it to a...
And then the question becomes, why does he only have those two horns? Was he, like, not crucible touched? I mean, that's obviously a strong possibility, especially because it's not as though all of the animals we find in the DLC are tangle-horned and whatnots. And then Corn, nice to see you again. German made some weird Mog stuff before actually finding the guy. And then Bork was asking, what's the deal with the Hornsent's fears for the fire giants? And based off of what we know about the Flame of Frenzy, that it's capable of burning away the spirit, and that the Flame of Ruin should have been able of burning the Erdtree, maybe they were afraid that the fell god of Ruin could burn away their spirits that they were trying to invoke divinity with. But I don't know. I really don't know why they feared the fire giants specifically, but it might just be a line to help connect the idea that Marika may have had allies with the Hornsent in her fight against the fire giants, which could later help justify why burning the Hornsent was seen as a betrayal later on.
Adulthood were expected to begin the process of becoming sculpted keepers, which was obviously lengthy, and most of them washed out and became curse blades, as we talked about earlier. Some became horn warriors, others became bird warriors, which is a very interesting rare knight you can find throughout the DLC. But the goal was to become a lion dancer, and the lion dance was originally just a thing of beauty and grace. But once the wars of the Lands of Shadow began to erupt, the enthralling dance of the lion took on a more martial role within the Hornsent society. Can't really say how good that worked out for them, seeing as how Messmer just casually pieces up one of their lion dancers in that DLC commercial, but they had to try something. And obviously the divine beast puppet clearly resembles the chain lions we see in the base game, or should I say the chain lions resemble.
And that just reminds me how interesting it is that Messmer's flame is said to have like a spirituality to it based off of the one fire knight item description, which I don't remember the exact name of off the top of my head.
The lion puppet. And those divine bird warriors I mentioned earlier serve a similar purpose to the lion puppets. It's essentially another discipline in the same societal religion that all of the Hornsent are a part of. Now, as for all the divine corpses we can find throughout Messmer's specimen storeroom, I'm more than certain he's responsible for a good amount of them, but possibly not all of them. We know some of the bigger horned corpses must just be some high-ranked, extremely large sculpted keepers. Perhaps it's some of the same ones he killed in the commercial. It seems less like a study hall and more of a trophy room, but I can't say that it doesn't have at least some scientific or occult knowledge, as the secret rite scroll is found there.
And I don't think I mentioned this on my stream, or maybe if I did, I only said it in passing, but if we have giants here, and a lot of the Hornsent are like chilling in Rao ruins, perhaps the tangle-horned giants in the specimen storeroom were originally from Rao, because it is right next to the Shadow Keep, and we don't really have a lot of other places which could accommodate them. So they either like roamed the world like nomads or lived in like the Rao civilization's ruins, or maybe perhaps the ancient dynasty of Ul and Erd. I always forget the other one, Ul and Uld. Yeah, I think that's it. Anyway, I don't like the old connection just because it just doesn't feel right to me. I think they're too big even for that one because it's more representative of things like Hellenistic archaeology. So I think they're too big for those temples. But anyway, somebody had asked me if I'd watch the new Tarnished Archaeologist video. No, honestly, I'm not going to watch TA's stuff just because I don't like the way that they go through the lore, to be honest. They put too much of the cart before the horse for me, and I'm just kind of over it. And then Spaghetti was saying the lions are scary looking, really well designed. Oh man, that's a story trailer when you get like the extra wrinkled, haggard looking lion dancer face is just peak enemy design to me. And hey Stella, welcome back in. And then Tony thinks the fire giants could be Fomorian-like entities who were chaotic beings, sometimes giants, who were constant bad guys in the Irish mythological cycles. And correct me if I'm wrong, weren't the Fomorians also depicted as being like Cyclops? Or maybe that's just like some bastardization of a Fomorian that I've seen from like a Japanese RPG, whether it's like Final Fantasy or Megaten. Okay, they were Cyclops. Okay, cool. I remembered something. Yeah, I wish I knew a little bit more about Gaelic/Irish mythology. I have like a very passing familiarity, less so than like my familiarity with Norse stuff, but I feel like Norse stuff is like all over the place where it's hard to find really good resources that are comprehensive and self-contained. They had an evil eye that reaped chaos when opened, just like the fire giant fight. Now I'm thinking about like the evil eye ring and whatnot from like Dark Souls. We don't really have too much of an equivalent to that in Elden Ring except for what, the Rift Shield? Anyway. Greek myth has, you're going to hate me for pronouncing it, so I'm not going to, an amazing website for their mythology. Will you put that into the miscellaneous discussion channel, Teen Sith, so that way I could go bookmark it sometime? Baelor was a leader. The Fomorians was also one-eyed. Interesting. Quaylog's been talking about the Celtic sun gods recently. Nice. Oh yeah, I'm really interested to check out. She posted something recently, and I forget. But anyway, 00083, welcome back into the stream. Your professors in college recommended it all the time? Sweet. Gotta love the academic sources. Please tell me it's like the equivalent of like 1997 GeoCities in terms of its formatting, because that's just peak internet to me. Anyway, that's not really relevant. It's a new Rao video. Oh yeah. The Rao ruins keep me up at night. I thought there was the one before that, which piqued my curiosity. Morlor said Norse stuff has like the two very Christian books and nothing before that, and it's annoyed people researching the mythology forever. Well, the thing is, like, I am interested in Norse mythology, but it feels like I get conflicting stories, and a lot of the other stuff that I get from like pop culture just like riffs on the ideas and it has like no connections to what actually came before. And so other than like super ancient Nordic type language stuff that I don't understand. There aren't a lot of great resources in English, but you might be on the right track. Okay, she talked about the Helfin. Hell, yes. Okay. Okay, thank you guys. Let's go back to the video.
Now, there's also some evidence that possibly the Hornsent might have prosecuted non-horned individuals. We already talked about how they probably took a bunch of the shamans, who we now know as the Newmans, and sliced them up and created the living jars out of them. There was also a tribe that was long subjugated, presumably by the Hornsent, and in the ravages of war, this tribe, this destitute tribe, discovered a twisted deity known as the Formless Mother, or the Mother of Truth, or the Mother of Wounds, the Blood Star, if you will. And just like that, the tribe was turned into the Blood Fiends, who we see all over the Shadow Realm. The Mini-Mogs, as I like to call them.
It didn't capitalize it this time. But anyway, yeah, when we look at the backs of the... I always want to call these Hornsent, but I'll probably just end up calling them Bloodsent by accident, but it'll work well enough. When we look at their backs, they also have that weird protrusion that's even more pronounced than the Lamenter. So I've wondered, like, why, if that's why its back kind of looks the way that it does.
And for the most part, they seem to just mind their own business and practice their little blood rituals. That being said, they seem to hold no love for Messmer's forces, regardless of what they've done with the Hornsent, as you can often find blood fiends fighting against Messmer's army. Now, this could just be because Messmer's army was ordered to eradicate everything that wasn't of the Golden Order or the Erdtree, and unfortunately the blood fiends do fall under that category, so this long subjugated tribe is still subjugated, just by different tormentors. At least they've got the Mother of Truth backing them up. The Hornsent's apparent treatment of all other races who didn't have horns is as likely an explanation as any as to why those with horns are generally viewed as cursed omens in the lands between by any and all outside of the Dung Eater. And I've talked at length in previous videos at how bad the omens got it. I mean, even the lions with omen horns are enslaved and have fucking blades nailed to their arms, presumably forced to fight in gladiator arenas or serve as guard dogs of forts. I'm actually kind of surprised Marika allowed Godfrey and Radahn to use so much lion imagery. But then again, Godfrey was of the Crucible and Radahn was a Godfrey fanboy.
Even beyond that, we could tie it in thematically to that whole idea of grafting, where they just kind of assimilate that which came before into their new order. It seems to be something that they might have been doing from the early days, with Godfrey taking the Sarash folk, and even Radagon, what's the word? Not subsuming, but something like that, with him doing the same thing to like all of the Godfrey iconography, and then trying to rewrite history to say that Marika was always the god, and Marika is Radagon, being kind of lost by the nameless king in the annals of history. Idiot. Anyway, yeah, so more lore was saying, if I want to know more Norse mythology, then just look at the prose Edda and the poetic Edda. So I have looked at that, and I've like read it through completely, but what I didn't maybe articulate it as well as I could have earlier. It seems like I've been getting conflicting accounts as to like what the stories are. So I've seen one version of the Edda which wasn't like compatible with the outcomes of like different stories. Now, a lot of the big beats are very similar, but it seems kind of like, this is not the best example, but it's the one that comes to mind. Like the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, where they have stories, and like Disney took those stories and Disneyfied them so that they're more wholesome, and there's like less. Well, let's just say that the morals of the stories are much more prominent, and beautiful people are good people and ugly people are bad. Anyway, setting that aside, I don't know what versions of the Edda are like the Disney version that I'm getting, or whether or not there's just multiple versions because of regional differences, which I think is a strong possibility. But I always feel like I'm on the other foot when somebody references Norse mythology, because it doesn't seem to be what I know of Norse mythology. And I'm not like extremely familiar to remember everything, and there's a lot of stuff that I've forgotten, but it's just always been one of those things where it's like, I don't know enough about stars, but that doesn't sound right, you know? Yeah. You only really know English, so you can't judge how good of a translation or something would be. Best advice you can give me is looking at what people say about certain ones, you guess. Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of almost limited to the realm of academics, just because it's such a niche topic. And I know there was some video that I saw a long time ago where I think it was somebody complaining about failing to find the word. It's like academics, but academicism? Anyway, they were complaining about that whole thing, and you were like a very prominent researcher of like Norse mythology specifically. And I meant to look more into their channel, but they seem to like move away from it because they're kind of done with all of the academics and whatnot, because it's a bit of a rat race in terms of like publishing and like staying relevant, job security. Anyway, I don't want to go like too far down that route. So yeah, it's just rough getting like super accurate information, because it seems like everybody has their own takeaways from like Norse mythologies, it seems to me. Not quite scholasticism. Jackson Crawford? Maybe. I'm gonna have to like look that up. Sorry for doing that live on stream. Maybe. I don't know if he has a video complaining about academics. Oh, damn it. I really need to switch my viewing resolution. Academics. Oh, yeah. This is it. This is definitely the video. The Advice to Young Academics video. This video is amazing. I'm actually going to go ahead and copy it and share it with you guys in the chat. I'll also like post it in the miscellaneous discussion video, miscellaneous discussion channel on my Discord, because it's so succinctly points out many of my own gripes with academia. That was the word. Academia. And why I declined to go into it myself. And thank you all for that little tangent there. Fortress of Lu. Okay, like Horlu. Gotcha. Thank you, Boric. Yeah. His channel seemed really good. I know I watched the academic video and maybe like one other thing, and I was like, oh man, this dude definitely knows his stuff. And then I think I just forgot about it, and you know, it's the travesty of living in this age of high speed information. Yeah, most professors and ex-professors with channels have gripes they're not subtle about. I mean, can you blame them? But what's her name? Like Nadine, the super German lady who's probably gotten into a lot of hot water for more of her recent videos complaining about academia. Professors are never subtle. All right. Okay, let's. Oh, operator is a professor. Can confirm. Hey now. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on, if we can.
America presumably met them in the middle and just said, lions are okay, but no horns. And look, a lot of good that did her. She wound up with 2 omen children. And this omen curse plaguing the lands between, and Queen Marika herself in particular, is is probably a result of the intense animosity that a destroyed people is capable of being manifested in her supposed perfect golden order, which we already know to be fundamentally flawed from the base game. And these apparent flaws in her own order made it both possible and easy for outer gods to meddle with the lands between, particularly the outer gods who previously held power and influence in the realm now known as the Lands of Shadows. Perhaps that's what outer gods was in reference to, because they were outside the lands between. Or conversely, maybe the Omen Curse is a outcome of the jar experimentation. One interesting thing of note is that the Omen dream of elder spirits, horned beings that torment them in their sleep, and the elders are probably some type of Hornsent.
Do they dream of quote-unquote elder spirits? Honestly, like, a lot of the Omen stuff is stuff that I don't remember super well off the top of my head, because it doesn't connect into a ton of other things. Elder spirits. My text up isn't finding it, so he might just be like speaking off the cuff here and not quoting anything. But if anybody knows specifically what he's talking about, feel free to link that in the chat.
Perhaps the Omen are plagued with memories of previous lives. Or again, it could just be that intense hatred and animosity manifesting itself in the lands between. Now, this nature of having nightmares and horns at the same time isn't exclusive to the Omen. The Hornsent themselves are also haunted by very particular imagery, in this case, the furnace visages and the faces of fire giants. Now, this could be because the flame that was used to burn the majority of the Hornsent was in fact the flame of the Fell God, now being used.
Alright, so you guys said to check the Omen Smirk mask. Well, this says evil spirits, not elder spirits. So, I was just wondering if there's anything referencing elder more specifically, because that implies something a bit different to me than evil, because elder has a certain connotation with age that evil does not, even though they're obviously elder to the Omen Smirks to some degree because they died before them. But nonetheless, like, elder could imply that they're like ancient spirits that couldn't moved on, which is a really cool idea. And I was pretty confident there wasn't anything like that, but yeah. The Imp Mask Elder. I guess there is that, but I don't think that is what it is. But thank you, more lore. Right, let me back it up a little bit because I got distracted.
And the faces of fire giants. Now, this could be because the flame that was used to burn the majority of the Hornsent was in fact the flame of the Fell God, now being used by Messmer the Impaler. And this Fell God is a...
I don't know if it is the Flame of Ruin. I mean, in many ways, I think this idea does make sense because we're told that his flame or his kindling was with the original sin, and we're told that the original sin was burning the Erdtree, and that the Flame of Ruin is capable of burning the Erdtree. But we also have that weird asterisk type situation of not being able to fully burn the Erdtree until destined death is unsealed. And we don't get anything in the game which specifies that Messmer's flame is affiliated with the fire giants, other than them using the imagery of the fire giants to scare the Hornsent. That's not good enough for me, but it scales on different stats, kind of like they use flame arts rather than like flame skills, although maybe there's not a flame monk, fire monk, Ash of War. I'd probably have to look at the crozier. The candlestick, whatever it's called. I'll get to that later. Damn it, I can't think of what else I was going to say. I'm going to back it up a little bit.
Exclusive to the Omen, the Hornsent themselves are also haunted by very particular imagery, in this case, the furnace visages and the faces of fire giants. Now, this could be because the flame that was used to burn the majority of the Hornsent was in fact the flame of the Fell God, now being used by Messmer the Impaler. And this fell god is, of course, the very same god who Marika sealed away inside the last of the fire giants. It was the flame of this very fell god that Messmer and his sister Melina bore a vision of at their birth. Messmer himself had...
And then, I guess, I was debating whether or not to bring this up, which is why I was, like, forgetting about it. We also have the question of when Messmer was born in relation to the war against the fire giants. I know some people believe that he could have been the firstborn child, despite Godric's Great Rune saying that Godfrey and the Golden Lineage were the first of the demigods. So, with Messmer having had his eye sealed with grace to keep the Abyssal Serpent at bay with the fire that he has, Messmer Flame, then it doesn't make much sense to me that that could happen potentially before the war against the giants, if that makes sense to you guys. Because if Messmer was born before all of the Godfrey children, then it should have been before the age of the Erdtree, potentially, I think. All of the timeline stuff with the children is quite annoying to me. Prelate charges a fire muckash. And then Teen Sith thinks that they're different words. Borg thinks there's too many flames to keep up. That Fell God flame is not exactly the same as Blood Flame. It is also not different from Destined Death and the Flame of Melina and Messmer. Yeah. Don't forget about, Black Flame and Ghost Flame and the most terrible of flames, the Flame of Ambition. No, not the Frenzied Flame. Flame of Ambition. Yeah, I like the idea that they would be the same as well, Teen Sith. It just, nothing ever really fits together as well as it could. It's infuriating a little bit. Putrescence Flame? I would still say even Putrescence Flame is Ghost Flame. Because it's based off the Rancor stuff. Actually, does it scale differently? You might be right about that. I would need to double check. It's one of the parts of the game that I'm not the best at knowing, the mechanical side of things. Because who plays the game when you can read descriptions instead, right?
Access to this flame. And it's for that exact reason that Marika sealed him away in the Land of Shadow to wage an unending crusade against the Hornsent. She sort of killed two birds with one stone. She managed to basically put her eternal enemies to the eternal sword, using her corrupted son who was born with the power of another one of her enemies, and sealed them all away in this shadow realm so they can kill each other for all eternity. It's honestly pretty genius on Marika's part. So when you boil this down to the stewed meat of it all, the Hornsent really aren't too different from the people of the Erdtree. They're prideful, arrogant, consumed by an air of superiority of all other things, and just as brutal with equally strange tastes in food. For example, Lands Between eats everything pickled, and the Hornsent eat scorpions. Both societies had their own unique customs and traditions, but they also shared some as well, as the Hornsent even had Empyreans. That old soup-cooking granny I mentioned earlier, over in Bellarat Tower? Well, she's described as an Empyrean grandma, but much like
Rip the Dream, that got retconned.
The soup she gives us, she's lived far too long past her time, perhaps out of pure spite and hatred towards Marika. As I think I mentioned earlier, she is still capable of one last gourmet soup before taking the long nap. But anyway, both sides of this ancient conflict really aren't that different. They both subjugate other beings. Only thing's different really is that the Hornsent lost, as Leda so eloquently put it in the commercial. That's why I think in many ways the Hornsent NPC we meet in the game is meant to be a parallel of the young Marika who'd lost a chunk of her people, who was filled with vengeance and hatred for the Hornsent people. Probably because the Newmen were said to be so rare and, they're few and far between. And she lost them to the brutality of the Hornsent, much like the Hornsent NPC lost all of his people to the brutality of Marika's worst child. So I think, if anything, this will be part one of my Hornsent videos, because I still need to read.
Yeah, I like that comparison of saying that the Hornsent NPC's journey is kind of like a similar thing to Marika's. I'm not sure how accurate that is. Not because I disagree or anything, but just because there's too many ambiguities about America, where I could see if we ever do get more information about that, that it could potentially contradict this idea here.
Read a bunch more descriptions, and I've probably still got things wrong, but that's the nature of things. This DLC is just barely getting cracked open. But yeah, part 2 will be coming soon. I really want to get this Mog video out of the way, and I know there's a certain Dark Souls 2 video I've been teasing for almost a year now that I'm just looking for the right time to finish up and drop is all. But yeah, this will be part 1 of the Hornsent video, and next up will be probably how we misunderstood Mog, and then once I finish Elyrim,
the capitals,
all of its various descriptions and whatnot, then I will make the Hornsent video part 2. Anyways, though, I hope you guys found this video to be at least somewhat informative or amusing or entertaining. And if you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on about various things, but probably for the next couple weeks, specifically Shadow of the Erdtree related things, then please consider subscribing. We just cracked 26K. Big deal for me. If you want to follow me somewhere else, I'm on Honored Madman on IG. That's really, I think, the only social media I have. And I was thinking of, I hate saying this kind of stuff because it's like e-beggar territory. I was thinking of setting up channel memberships. Maybe I'll have like more off the cuff. Maybe I'll figure out how streaming works and I'll do more off the cuff videos about, movies and TV or more obscure lore topics, or maybe lore topics that I feel have been talked about to death by other people, but not by me. Like ideas I hadn't planned to make videos of, but I could still, I still have a lot to say about. So I might do something like that, channel.
So if Honored Madman ever watches my reaction to his stuff, I would say go for it. Definitely with the channel memberships. Before I started my channel, I was like, I'm not going to monetize it or anything. And then I found out YouTube doesn't give a shit and they'll still play ads over any video. So it's like, well, damn, if they're going to, play ads regardless of what I'm going to do, I may as well get a chunk of the pie. And channel memberships are a nice way of supplementing the income, and they can help improve the channel, like buying new microphones, new equipment, capture cards, stuff like that. It can definitely help. And also, crap, it's money. It can be exchanged for goods and services. So there's almost no reason not to, unless you just don't want to deal with the headache of having a little bit of an extra sheet for your taxes, but it's pretty straightforward, all things considered. So, okay, anyway, I think he's going to keep rambling about that ending stuff, and he'll probably do his bong grip, so we'll just kind of adjust and go on from there. So I'm going to go ahead and post his video into the chat for you guys. If you want to show the Honored Madman any love and support, you can do so there. So yeah, as far as the Gray Violet description goes, and that was one video that I wanted to look at right before the DLC dropped, but I kind of ran out of time. I don't remember who made it, but there was somebody who did a video about the color of Ghost Flame with the Gray Violets, but the localization says it's the same hue as Ghost Flame, but the Japanese just says it's the flower of Ghost Flame, which might be irrelevant in that, maybe because it's the flower of the Ghost Flame, it should have the same color, but it's different enough to have the color of the flame be, or the color of the flower potentially be divorced from the flame. You got hit with a quick Domino's commercial. Have you guys been getting a lot of ads? Because I've seen 5 already. Not on my, I don't get ads on my own stream, but I've been getting the pop-ups, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? It's the most I've ever seen. So you guys have been getting more ads? Okay, Corn has gotten 0. So it's weird. I wonder if it's telling me whenever it's staggering ads for anyone. Actually, I don't know if I don't know if you can get ads because you're a channel member. I don't know how that works, to be honest. I don't know if it's like Twitch. How do you avoid ads? Well, there's obviously YouTube Premium, but I don't know if becoming a channel member will do that. Either because you're giving me money or uBlock is still working. I know uBlock works with a non-Chrome browser. But, yeah. And the art book has red spider lilies. Yeah, the red spider lilies are all along Charo's hidden grave. I love that little detail. Yeah, since Stella's on mobile, it won't let you do live chat, so you're on the app. Understandable. Appreciate it. And my condolences for all the ads, guys, but thanks for taking one for the team. Honestly, if I could influence it so that way I could do no ads, I would, just because they kind of annoy me as a user. But the only option that I have is just to click a conservative tab, or occasionally click the skip ads button if I notice it pop up. But let's be real here, I'm not the best at doing that. So, okay. Yeah, that was a good video, especially for it being released only 6 days after the game came out. So you also have to take into account that it took him time to produce this video as well. So it's kind of more like a 5-day type take on the lore. So obviously there were some misses here and there, but overall it was definitely good. So this is, yeah, a good video. Now, let's go ahead and transition into the next one for the night. It might be the last one, I don't know. Messmer, a Deconstruction of Villainy by Fat Brett. So, like I was saying earlier in the stream, I might make a Messmer video at some point, especially after having some of my thoughts more solidified after talking about it on stream the other night. But if this video is good enough, then I might not feel the need to do so. So let's go ahead and
Messmer the Impaler
dive on in. And he's coming across a little bit louder, so I might need to turn it down. And if you guys ever want me to adjust the volume if it's imbalanced, please let me know, because I can't exactly hear myself and stream at the same time. I mean, I could, but I can't handle it. So, all right, here we go.
Messmer the Impaler is initially portrayed as a very stereotypical villain. He was the leader of an extremely violent religious crusade, a genocidal murderer who burned his enemies alive, a dangerous zealot who attempted to brutally purge everyone and everything he viewed as impure. Even his title, the Impaler, is an allusion to the historical Vlad the Impaler, a ruler who was so notorious for his cruelty and brutality that he served as an inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Impalement.
So, this is something that I've wondered for a while, and Messmer's form of impalement isn't the same kind of impalement of the burned folk that we see in the Lands Between proper, that are on the kind of rune arcs of America type situation, like the screaming boys outside of the first step. So, these dudes don't scream at night. But they do become shade folk. I guess that would be another reason to think that Messmer's flame is significantly different from the Fire Giant's flame, because we don't get shades. Well, we kind of do get shades, but they're just white ghostly shades on the mountaintops. And they aren't of people, obviously, but they're just like the fauna, like the spirit deer and rabbits and whatnot. So anyway, going back to that first thing that I was talking about with the rune arc thing, I've wondered whether or not that idea is similar to the hanged men depiction on the let's just try to show this off real quick, of the hunter's rune. Like on my little chat bar right now, you can kind of see the hunter's rune in the middle there. I guess I could show off like a hanged man tarot card picture, but it won't really matter. So putting that back on the screen, if impaling people and impaling people and burning them is similar to the hanged man mechanic and the hunter's rune, that might be what allowed the gold to drip out of them, and that might have been where they got their first blessings of the Erdtree, essentially, or the flask, or maybe they took runes from dead people essentially and then funneled them back into the Erdtree, is one thought that I've had. And there was something else in the DLC which made me think about that a bit more, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Please tell you what the hell is going on with the Abyssal Serpent and Eagle. Well, now I'm not doing it. No, I don't know, man. Impaling was a much quicker death than crucifixion. Crucifixion, you slowly suffocated to death as gravity slowly caused your chest to collapse in and upon itself. Jesus done lucked out. He does get stabbed, doesn't he? So I was gonna say that historically the death time of like Jesus was abnormally quick for crucifixion, from what I've heard. But yeah, I guess that is a fundamental difference. Like, the dudes are crucified as opposed to being impaled in the lands between, but they're also burned. And we burned the Erdtree to kind of release its gold a little bit, or at least its thorns, its shadow thorns. I don't know where I'm going with this. The stabbing didn't kill him? That was just how they tested. Yeah, I was just joking, though. Okay, let's go back into the video. I'm going to back it up a bit, too.
The Impaler, a ruler who was so notorious for his cruelty and brutality that he served as an inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Impalement is a particularly horrific method of torture and execution in which the human body is penetrated by a stake, often in such a way as to not kill immediately. There are records of people living for days after being impaled and begging passers-by to finish them off. The stories are pretty brutal.
And that might tie into what Boric just posted in chat, in that historically the terms crucifixion and impalement were almost identical in usage. They used to mean to hang someone off a tree, pole, or a stick. Sometimes the dying happened way before the hanging up. And I know even in different forms of Christianity, there is a little bit of a disagreement about like the means in which the crucifixion happened. As for instance, I know the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that rather than it being a cross that Jesus was nailed to, that he was just put on a stake. S-T-A-K-E, by the way. So Corin might have more to say about that, and I might be wrong about that, but that is what I've heard, at least about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, Messmer the Impaler, like his inspiration, is meant to be a scary guy. However, despite all of this, as the game progresses, the more his story is revealed, the more complicated his character becomes. It begins to seem as if Messmer is a kind of victim too, that his violent rampage in the realm of Shadow was driven by someone else, that he was always just the tool of an even greater villain. In the end, while he is definitely not absolved of his crimes, the audience will probably pity Messmer just as much as they revile him. To fully understand his character, both the vile and the pitiable, we are going to follow his story from beginning to end, from the player's first footsteps in the realm of Shadow, through every surprising revelation, all the way to his monstrous and explosive final confrontation. Alright, so let's start at the start. Messmer's story begins as soon as you arrive in the realm of Shadow. It is first revealed through environmental storytelling. I've seen some people say that they felt that Messmer did not appear in the story enough, just 2 short cutscenes and a single boss fight. But his presence can be felt everywhere in this setting. There's so much story to uncover in the visual design here. This is the gravesite plain, a field filled with gravestones, so old they have begun to dissolve into spirits and fade away. Masses of gravestones are a common environmental design trope in From Software games.
And speaking of the gravestones, taking the spirits in within them, that does make me wonder about the nature of Marika and her Newman ability, essentially, and all of the things about the Miko and the jar scent melding harmoniously with others and whatnot. So if it is a weird property of stone to be able to accept spirit in the lands between. And when we fight Marika and defeat the Elden Beast, we see that she has a stone-like body. That makes me wonder whether or not part of the reason she was able to accept the Elden Beast is that she's kind of a rock of some sort, almost, in that she's able to allow the spirit of the beast to possess her body, or there might be some other stuff going along with the beast. I still want to do a deep dive into will and like the greater will in Elden Ring, because a lot of it is quite reminiscent of Schopenhauer or like Nietzsche almost, I think. Nietzsche. But the divide between soul and will is just something that I almost feel like I want to do more research on, like with outside philosophy or like Taoism or ancient Chinese beliefs, to see if there's a bit more to it than I know. And then Teen Sith said, vestigial virgins found of broken chastity were essentially buried alive with some extra steps so the Romans could say they didn't execute them because that was illegal. we didn't execute her. She suffocated underground. Yeah. That almost, it's so barbaric. It sounds absurd to the point of almost being like a Monty Python sketch.
They are meant to symbolize a setting which has been overwhelmed, even suffocated by death, cities and kingdoms collapsing under the weight of the mass death that has occurred there. But we've never seen anything at the scale of the gravesite plain before. Here, the gravestones stretch all the way to the horizon, symbolizing an incredible amount of dying in this location. And
I'm going to be pedantic about this because it's fun to do that sometimes, but I would make the argument that you could say the inner ramparts of Altus Plateau / Lane Dell could arguably have more corpses here because they're more directly stacked on top of each other than the gravestones, which are a little bit more spread apart. But he might be right when you combine the entirety of all of the Shadowlands rather than like the one specific location of the Altus Plateau region. But to be fair, I also think that these spirit stones aren't necessarily all because of Messmer, and these are probably ancient deaths that have just kind of coalesced here for whatever reason. Anyway.
Symbolizing an incredible amount of dying in this location. And Messmer is personally responsible for much of that death. He led the violent crusade which shattered this ancient kingdom, and the scars of that war can be seen everywhere. One of the very first locations you will encounter is this ruined town, where every building has been demolished. Corpses have been strung up from trees, and the few survivors stumbling among the rubble have transformed into shadow beings, their bodies dissolving into shades. Nearby, you will run into your first furnace golem. These are titanic iron baskets, filled to the brim with still burning corpses. If you look closely, you can see that many of these people died while reaching out through the bars in an attempt to escape, which means they were thrown and piled in here while they were still alive. They were burned up.
I'm going to be honest, I think this is a little bit of rule of cool, but just to treat this a bit more seriously, we do have, it isn't entirely fair to compare Elden Ring to like Dark Souls 3, but we do have examples of other Wickerman type creatures in DS3 with like the little cage boys in the undead settlement, where they kind of have like their arms and legs sticking out. So my whole point with that is it wouldn't surprise me if they even stuck their bodies out in death, but who knows. It is also interesting to like wonder how exactly the furnace golems are piloted. Like, what is the mechanism which like gives them will to move around? Is it like glintstone in their mask? Is it literally all of the burning bodies within them? Are they kind of effectively like sacrifices, like red glintstone type stuff going on, or whatnot? But man, The Furnace Golem design is just so good. It's so peak, and then you fight 12 of them. Hey, Colorless Fog, welcome on into the stream. Just don't block the door, will you?
Alive in this thing. These furnace golems are tools of mass torture and execution employed by Messmer's crusaders. Follow this road and you will reach...
Alright, sorry, I tried pausing it like 3 times right there. Alright, so Colorless Fog, if you linked a video into the chat, it tends to get eaten either by like Nightbot or YouTube itself. I don't really know. So if you do that, would you please leave a comment either on this video or in my Discord server under the channel ideas tab, so that way I can add it to my playlist, because I'll just forget about it if you tell me to do it on stream, unfortunately. Yeah. If you guys ever have requests, be sure to either do this, what I just said, with like a comment on the respective video stream of mine. Like, don't comment on their video and be like, hey LP, watch this. I'm like, they're gonna be like, who the hell is that? Anyway, so the Discord is the easiest thing because it'll be archived, and so that way if I don't get a notification of a comment for whatever reason, then it won't get lost in the sauce there. And thank you and welcome into the stream. And then KCB, welcome in. Yeah, the masks have animations when they're knocked over. The fact that their faces move is really cool. Alright, let me back it up a bit because I was totally distracted.
in this burning corpses. If you look closely, you can see that many of these people died while reaching out through the bars in an attempt to escape, which means they were thrown and piled in here while they were still alive. They were burned alive in this thing. These furnace golems are tools of mass torture and execution employed by Messmer's crusaders. Follow this road and you will reach the Castle Ensis, where hundreds more corpses have been impaled and burnt, executed by one of the most horrific methods possible. And over all of this looms the ominous Shadow Keep, the black fortress of Messmer the Impaler, a classic evil villain lair. This is the sort of place where someone like Darth Vader or Sauron would go for vacation. If you follow...
Do we have any Willow fans in the chat? Bav Morta and the Keep, which name I cannot remember. Man, I loved the original Willow, and I was hoping that the sequel series would be good, but I made it like 2 episodes in and was like, it's alright. I just didn't have the motivation to keep watching, which sucks. Because the world building for the original Willow was so good. Like, it felt like magic was kind of magical, and that there was still kind of like a logic and sense to the world, though, and only a very select few people could even begin to wield it. Willow, you idiot. Burgle cut. Mad Mardigan. Oh man, I love Val Kilmer in that role. He's so good. I think he gets like, he doesn't get enough credit for some of his smaller roles. Anyway,
a place where someone like Darth Vader or Sauron would go for vacation. If you follow this road in the other direction, you will arrive at the Belurot Tower settlement. The people of this land were called the Hornsent, and their civilization was concentrated around...
What a nerd. He's got the low poly version loaded in. Sorry, it's stuff like that I can't help but notice because doing the content creation. I didn't give Honored Madman the shit for always having his compass on because he was just using his telescope, which I noticed, but I don't know. It's just kind of something that I can't turn off in my brain anymore.
On this tower. Notice the design of the architecture here. The old weathered stone, the classical statuary and friezes, reminiscent of Greco-Roman or even Persian ruins. I think the design of this tower was inspired by the mythological Tower of Babel. In that story, an arrogant group of humans build a tower tall enough to reach the heavens, so that, in their hubris, they can stand abreast with the gods themselves, which ultimately leads to disaster. According to the spiral literal tree seal, the Hornsent's white tower also stretched up into the sky high enough to reach the gods, and was so majestic that it inspired devotion even in the Erdtree faithful. Through this visual design, the civilization of the Hornsent is being portrayed as far older and more ancient than the Golden Order of the Lands Between, which, for the most part, has a later European medieval-inspired design. In this ancient civilization,
which is a bit weird because I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like in many ways a lot of the Hornsent and Near Limb stuff is more sophisticated and therefore should actually come later. And beyond that, all of these types of buildings, like these forts specifically, are more directly associated with the Banished Knights because of the weaponry. And the Banished Knights themselves seem to be followers of Sarash before Godfrey, because we see in the Tree and Beast Surcoat a depiction of the lion, the Beast Regent, and that lion is also used in the rallying standard by Commander O'Neill. Although, to be fair, he could just be using that banner because at that point he'd already been allied with the forces of Godfrey and the Golden Lineage and whatnot. So there is still some ambiguity, but it does also stand out to me that the Banished Knight armor has horns on it, not entirely dissimilar to those that you'd see on something like the Sculpted Keeper set or the Hornsent set, although I think it's more like on their shoulders and stuff. My initial impressions of the Banished Knight armor was that it's probably meant to thematically tie into the way that the Ringed City Knight armor also had horns on it, because they like fought dragons and whatnot. So they're probably ancient, but we didn't know exactly who they worked for, and they could have potentially worked for somebody before Sarash. But it is also interesting that they've all been banished from like their homelands and whatnot. So anyway, moving on with that.
A later European medieval-inspired design.
All right. So yeah, the medieval style design here I think is actually simpler, and it would not surprise me if those buildings are actually older than Bellirat. But I could be wrong there, because so historically, like the Persians and whatnot, and their architecture was definitely way ahead of like the later Middle Ages in Europe. So you could definitely have that kind of a disparity still at play here, and everything would be perfectly fine. It does bother me that we don't get more crossover from like the DLC stuff to the base game and vice versa. But I mean, we'll just be a broken record talking about that issue specifically. And then Camellia, welcome on in. The Alter Drake armor also has a horn on the shoulder? Yes. And Corn also thought the Banished Knight horn was a dragon horn. Yeah, and Teen Sith brings up a great point that the ancient cultures in real life are a lot more sophisticated than people tend to give them credit for. And it's partially why conspiracy theorists latched onto the pyramids, because the pyramids were so geometrically perfect and well constructed. Yeah, and man, it would be so cool to have like actually seen the pyramids back before like all the limestone had been eroded and broken away and like stolen, like the capstones removed and everything, because they're majestic even now as ruins of their former selves. So just imagine seeing them in their glory. And also, like, this fact is like mind-blowing to me, that wasn't it like the ancient Romans were closer to us than they were to the ancient Egyptians who actually built the pyramids? But in our minds, we tend to lump them all together because of like Caesar, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra. It's just pyramid lore was definitely obscured by Miyazaki. It's crazy. Okay, let's go back to the video, and I'm loving the discussion.
And this ancient civilization has been utterly ruined by Messmer's crusade, destroyed, shattered all the way down to its foundations. Messmer did not just kill the people here, he destroyed their very way of life. This is cultural genocide. Except maybe not. Later, when we explore the Shadow Keep, we will find that its largest tower has been converted into a storeroom, in which Messmer has preserved thousands upon thousands of ancient tomes, presumably looted from Belurot and other Hornsent settlements. Contrary to what we would expect, Messmer has made some effort to preserve the cultural and historical artifacts of his enemies. This is one of those moments where his character gets more complicated, where he begins to seem like more than just a generic evil fantasy villain. No explicit motivation is ever given as to why he chose to maintain this storeroom. According to the description of Fire Knight Hilda's spirit ashes, it was some of the Fire Knights, his closest comrades, who insisted on the preservation project, but the final decision lay with their commander. For whatever reason, Messmer allowed himself to be convinced to maintain a massive library dedicated to the Hornsent's collected historical knowledge, even as he continued to slaughter them by the thousands.
Because even Messmer knew that burning the Library of Alexandria was unforgivable, even more than the original sin. So anyway, yeah, about this whole thing here, I don't know how to take it, because this could be spun multiple ways as to whether or not he was preserving culture or he's I don't know how to phrase this. Like, not preserving culture so much as he is like archiving a method of research into becoming divine, which America may not have wanted to go to waste, because we also have some of these tablets in the Erdtree Sanctuary bedchamber for Queen America herself, and I don't think that was a coincidence, but it is very interesting to me that we have like the Hornsent shades all in the Shadow Keep, but none of them have horns. So did he just burn common folk as well? What is going on with the Shadow Keep in general? But I think he'll continue to like get into his points as we move on.
Reveals something about his character, that he is perhaps not the total unwavering zealot we first presumed him to be. But let's return to the Belurot Tower settlement. If you look up from these ruins, you will notice something strange. The tower around which this city was built has been shrouded in shadow and surrounded by tangled dark branches that prevent entry. According to the Hornsent Grandam, the tower was obscured by Messmer himself, but she does not explain why. After seeing this, you might begin to suspect that there is something else.
Wait, does she say that Messmer did it himself? I'm gonna have to double check this. What is a line that she says? Strumpet. Alright, that's Miquella's stuff. That's hers. Okay. No, it's not all together. Oh, wait. We can keep looking. She says strumpet a lot. Okay, so I think he's taking a little bit of a liberal read on this. Oh, this is probably too small. Wait. I can make this bigger, right? Oops. I'm blind. Why can I not see anymore? Hopefully this is good. Let me look at my OBS. It's not worse, not much worse than my chat. Okay, so anyway, where was it? Our lands were by thy kind set to flame, our tower by thy kind veiled in shadow. Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that has to be Messmer, as much as it was like Marika and her forces. So even though that I tend to believe that the sealing of the Shadowlands may have happened later, I still think there is enough ambiguity for doubt in that it could have happened earlier. Where's me chat? There it is. And hey, Davin Sosa, nice to see you again. Just because he kept some books, that doesn't mean it wasn't genocide. Exactly. What was I going to say else besides that? Right. So, even with my doubt here, I can't necessarily just discount the idea that it could have been done by Messmer, because we need to use his kindling to burn the sealing tree specifically. So there is certainly enough reason to believe that he had a direct hand in it. But it's all a little bit obscure, pun intended, because of that damn story trailer which says that both Gold and Shadow were created at the same time with America, which makes it sound like it could have been then which the tower was shrouded in shadow. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive back in.
Going on here. Messmer is not just here to murder every Hornsent he can find, he's also here to hide something up in that tower, but we'll discuss that more later. So what is going on here? Why is Messmer slaughtering all of these people in the first place? What are his motivations? The Crusader insignia partly answers that question. Its description reads, a talisman depicting a raised spear on a backdrop of flames, in remembrance of the lives lost in the sacred crusade led by Messmer. The warriors who fought in the crusade set aside both honor and mercy to wantonly impale and scorch those deemed impure. Those who felt invigorated by each cry of death were the same men who were certain of the sanctity of the campaign. So it was a religious crusade to destroy those deemed impure. Other item descriptions speak to the brutality and violence of Messmer's campaign. For example, the Black Knight helm description reads, a rotten odor stubbornly clings to it. Perhaps it arises from the tainted nature of the blood that splattered upon it, or perhaps it is the wearer's own blackened soul festering after endless slaughter. And the description.
And that is one of my favorite descriptions in the game, the Black Knight set. But hold on. But I haven't talked about it too much because it uses hearsay, and I try to stick with as much concrete detail as possible. But yes, that final line there about the wearer's own blackened soul festering after endless slaughter does make me indeed wonder about the nature of the blackened shades that we can find throughout the Shadow Realm, i.e. those of the Hornsent that were killed by Messmer and all of the random folk in the Shadow Keep. So I don't necessarily think that slaughter is the precondition which would make somebody's soul become blackened, as much as it is just being impure in general. And that ties back into that first line about perhaps it arises from the tainted nature of the blood that splattered upon it. But nonetheless, it is also interesting that we don't ever get any depictions of like shaded, tarnished, or Black Knights or anything like that. I think like the closest parallel that you'd get would perhaps be the gigantic dudes wielding like the misbegotten cleavers in Belierot and whatnot, or just the other random not Hornsent shades that are Hornsent essentially, but they don't share the same kind of model as the player, at least. Kegare, indeed, exactly, Mortis.
Soul festering after endless slaughter. And the description of the serpent flail reads, a flail with coiled snakes for bludgeoning heads. Fire roars within the snakes' bodies, inflicting horrible burns. Some of Messmer's army used these flails to burn Hornsent, to brand them with agony and fear. So the Crusaders were not just killing the Hornsent, they were...
And agony and fear also makes things become cursed as they die, because that's where you get that resentment, that enmity, that attachment to the physical world. So maybe there's something more going on with this. So just to give a bit of an off-the-cuff, like, food for thought type comment, a conspiracy theory rabbit hole to drop down into. What if the crusade against the Hornsent was instigated by America at the end of the Age of Abundance as a desperate attempt to reclaim more bodies and souls to feed back into the Erdtree? I think that's a neat idea, but I don't know how compatible it would be with all of the shades that we find in the Realm of Shadow.
Were torturing them. They were invigorated by their cries of pain. They delighted in spreading terror among their victims. The description of the Messmer's soldier armor set makes it clear that this was not an honorable or noble war. This was a war of slaughter and carnage and murder. But why did Messmer and his crusaders target the Hornsent? Why were the Hornsent deemed impure? That question is answered by the description of the fine crucible feather talisman, which reads, "A talisman fashioned from thin feathers that embody the aspects of various creatures, said to have grown on the human body long ago." Hornsent view the crucible as sacred for the refinement wrought through its evolutionary gifts, most prominently their entangled horns. We know from the Crucible Knight armor set that the Crucible was the primordial form of the Erdtree, its predecessor. Those touched by the Crucible, like the Omens, the Misbegotten, and now the Hornsent, have humanoid bodies with surprising additions, wings and tails, and, most notable of all, twisting, spiraling horns. In the lands between, those touched by the Crucible are reviled. The Omen are forced to live in the sewers or have their horns violently cut off. The Misbegotten are enslaved and mistreated. But the people of the Tower had a different perspective. They viewed the...
So there is also one potential difference between the horns of the Hornsent as talked about in those item descriptions versus just horns in general, in that the Hornsent view the Crucible as sacred for giving them tangled horns, so they might not necessarily get tangled horns naturally, and the extra blending of Crucible life might push them over the edge to get like superior forms of horns, perhaps. But that is just a bit of conjecture on my part.
Touch of the Crucible as divine and holy, that the changes it brought to the body were something to be celebrated. So, at least in part, this was a religious war between those who worshipped the Erdtree and those who worshipped the Crucible, those who despised its changes to the body and those who welcomed them. But I think there is more going on here. The Hornsent are treated even worse than the Omen and Misbegotten. The Omen may be persecuted, but they are at least still allowed to exist, whereas the Hornsent are slaughtered without mercy by the tens of thousands. Skipping ahead, when we defeat Messmer, we gain access to his armor, whose description reads, "On his mother's wishes, Messmer made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she desired." This makes it clear that this was really Queen Marika's crusade. Messmer was only ever acting under her orders. It is possible that the Hornsent are just seen as a greater threat than the Omen or Misbegotten. After all, they are an ancient, organized civilization, which was perhaps powerful enough to threaten Queen Marika's Golden Order. But I think she has a more personal reason for wishing for the annihilation of the Hornsent. To understand that reason, we need to talk about jars. Alright, so there are a lot of magical jars in the world of Elden Ring. For example, the warrior jars, which are sentient and capable of thought, feeling, and speech. The warrior jars are filled with the corpses of human warriors, and it is those corpses which give them their strength. In the Realm of Shadow, jars are used by the Hornsent in a very different way. The jails of the Realm of Shadow are filled with jars, and you can find this phantom in one of them who is begging his captors not to put him inside a jar, that he'll do anything to avoid that fate. So the Hornsent use jars to punish criminals.
I do wish I had a better understanding of the white-spirited ghosts as opposed to like Rancor or something else, like those who live in death, because they seem more distinct, but they don't exactly seem cursed. And maybe it's just because the roots of the Erdtree have been disconnected. They're just kind of stuck, so they're lost in death, perhaps, but, you know, not like Scullabros. Yeah, I just don't know what entirely to make of them. And I think we have other forms of ghosts as well. Oh, yeah, the blue forms of, like, the ancestral followers in Schiefer River for some reason. Like, what the hell's going on with those? I don't know. Jars mentioned, for real. Mortis believes this video doesn't mention the mistranslation of America fearing Messmer serpent, so the vid is a bit dated. This is still early DLC release. Oh no, I take a lot of that stuff with a grain of salt, and if there's ever discrepancies between the English and Japanese text, I don't really blame people for not knowing about it, because if you don't know something, you just don't know. Alright, let's go back in.
The potentates of Bonnie Village are the special butchers who know a particular method of carving up human bodies and shoving them into the jars. After this method is applied, the chopped up flesh placed in these jars eventually coalesces and is reborn into these horrific living meat blobs. But it is not just criminals who receive this terrible treatment. In Bonnie Village, you can find this phantom who is speaking to his next victim. And he says, "For pity's sake, your place is in the jar. Nigh sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone." I have been told that, in the Japanese version, the term being used here is Miko, which is usually translated as shrine maiden rather than shaman. Historically, Japanese shrine maidens were young women who performed important spiritual works at religious sites, such as communing with spirits or with the divine. This additional context will be important later. So, female shamans are another group of people who the Hornsent forced into jars, and a nearby item, the Tooth Whip, explains why. Its description reads, "Whip bestrewn with rotting
Oh, look at that character right there, that 713 level build with 99 on all stats and a light load.
Shapen teeth, filthy and seething with disease. The teeth are embedded in the whip and dose the victim with deadly poison upon each strike. As the wounds ripen, they grow inflamed and ooze pus. The flesh of shamans was said to meld harmoniously with others. So the purpose of all of this is that the Hornsent, seemingly, believed that they could transform criminals into saints by carving up their bodies and shoving them into these magical jars in some sort of foul ritual performed by the Bonnie Village butchers. The flesh of shamans facilitates this process because, for whatever reason, the Hornsent believed that the flesh of a shaman was capable of more readily merging with the flesh of others. The shaman flesh acts as a sort of binding agent within the jar, holding the whole concoction of criminal meat together. If you look
And just to give you guys a little bit more reason to hate the Hornsent, there is a slight difference in the Japanese there of the Tooth Whip, in that rather than it just saying that the flesh of Miko melds harmoniously with others, it's more specifically after it's oozing and festering with, not like scarlet rot, but after it's literally oozing and festering, that it will blend with other flesh well. And then Dylan was asking, could the ghosts be like lingering memories, a bit like the way Melina can hear the lingering words of Marika at churches? I really like that idea. I think that's a strong possibility, because they don't ever... Well, I guess they do kind of interact with the environment. Yeah, I don't know, because I would be more inclined to go along with that, except when we burn the Erdtree and go back to Leyndell, we get a couple new ghosts. One that is hailing Godfrey, and one that has noticed that the Erdtree is burning. So I don't think they're just fully memories, like voice recordings or answering machines. That's a good idea, though. Morlor said, how did they even find that out? Good question.
Closely at the model for the meat blobs, you'll notice that the center mass upon which all the other flesh is melded appears to be a female body. This is what is left of the shaman who is forced inside the jar. According to that previous item description, shamans were not simply killed, but first tortured, whipped until their flesh was malleable and soft, If you had the bad luck to be born a female shaman anywhere near Hornsent society, you were in for a very bad time. You could expect to be captured, tortured, and brutally mutilated without mercy, all to facilitate a bizarre ritual meant to grant saintly rebirth to criminals. Well, not so far away, in the hinterlands of the Realm of Shadow, we can find this village of shamans, which is completely empty, presumably because all of its residents were kidnapped and murdered by the Hornsent. Surprisingly, this village is defended by 2 Golden Order Tree Sentinels, and notably is only a short walk away from a finger ruin. In the
I'll be pedantic and say we don't actually know if they're Golden Order Tree Sentinels, but we're just told that they're Erdtree Sentinels, but I understand how that can get lost in the sauce. Panicked Pike, nice to see you again, and Koi Pop the 77th, welcome on in. How does the Dung Eater's curse meld with the DLC's elaborations? He strips his victims of grace, doesn't he? Sounds familiar. I don't think he strips his victims of grace as much as it is he causes them to become tainted and impure, and this impurity curses people either metaphorically or literally, so that way they cannot pass on in peace and rejoin the roots of the Erdtree and be granted Erdtree burial. But a lot of stuff relating to the Curse of the Hornsent and the Curse of the Omen is tied to the horns more specifically, and we are even told that the Hornsent have tainted flesh, and all of this stuff kind of makes a bit more sense with how more consistently the Japanese text talks about impurity in relation to horns, blood, and curses with the whole theme of Kegare. And then Pike was saying, it kind of seems like the shaman bodies didn't meld harmoniously at all. They're the only bodies completely intact therein. And you might be able to say that, especially in relation to the way that the warrior jars are more like claymen rather than like one individual shaman type thing that has extra stuff added to it. Like the warrior jars seem to be an individual and shaman do not. I guess I could just call them jar scent, do not. Morlor says, one of the sentinels has something that looks identical to one of the sentinel torches that were enchanted for the Night of the Black Knives. Yeah, we talked a lot about that when we fought them on stream. So there is the possibility that Morgoth could have blessed an existing style of torch. If we want to try to do some mental gymnastry to explain the situation, they could have been later additions to the Shadow Realm. Which maybe we should think about that a bit more as well. Well, they weren't Draconic Tree Sentinels, so they could have gone or been in the Shadowlands before the war against the Ancient Dragons, I suppose. And somebody was trying to ask me to go invisible to see if they'd recognize me with their torch, but I didn't read chat in time to test it out. But yeah, I think you can explain it with some lore mental gymnastery or just saying dev oversight if you really want to go down that route. But all right, let's go back in.
Village, you can find 2 important relics. The first is the minor Erdtree incantation, whose description reads, Secret incantation of Queen Marika, only the kindness of gold without order. Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. Second is the golden braid, whose description reads, a braid of golden hair cut loose. Queen Marika's offering to the grandmother. What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There is no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. This means that this village of shamans was her home. That Queen Marika...
I wonder if there's any significance to the ring-like shape on the outer part of the braid. Because it almost looks like it's made of runes after all. A Festival Grease. Wait, does Festival Grease actually have a similar design? I'm going to look it up real quick. Where is it? Oh no. Wait. Is this Festival of Greece? No, the Festival of Greece has like flowers and stuff. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's not with all the other ones. Oh no, I think that one's actually missing from this file. Yeah, I don't think I actually have the icon for Festival Grease super handy, so I might need to do a search, but I might just move on. Oh wait, nope, found it. Okay. Alright, so Festival Grease doesn't have anything. But the Holy Proof... Wait! I was wondering what the hell this was on the Holy Proof dried liver. Is this supposed to be the same thing as that? Hold on, how do I... Let's make it a little bit bigger. Am I crazy, chat? Could this be like a broken form of this thing? Let's move it back that way. What did we use to make this? Like the golden bone shards, whatever they're called? Even if we like figure it out, I'm not so sure how relevant it is. All right. What was I saying before all that? I don't remember. I know I was thinking about the Melina stuff, being able to use like a way better version of the minor Erdtree incantation, but I was going to leave it alone. Oh, yeah, the grandmother stuff. So the grandmother might be a reference to something like the Empyrean grandma, the Hornsent grandma. There is a bit of ambiguity with the Japanese where like grandmother versus like great mother, like they essentially mean the same thing, but grandmother has a specific connotation that like great mother does not, even though it semantically it's kind of identical in a very literal sense of the term. So I don't know whether or not this description is supposed to be grandmother in the traditional sense or great mother in like the metaphorical sense, and whether or not that great mother could extend to something like Metter. So a ring in your Elden Ring? More likely than you'd think. Something like that. Does look a bit similar. Okay. Let's go back in.
Again. This means that this village of shamans was her home, that Queen Marika was born a shrine maiden, that her kinsmen were taken and slaughtered by the Hornsent for their bizarre rituals. This change.
That's a great way to explain it, Orlor. There's a difference between grandmother with a space and grandmother without. True story. I'll need to think about that. And the best part about Japanese is there's no spaces. Did I say best? Whoopsies.
Kinsmen were taken and slaughtered by the Hornsent for their bizarre rituals. This changes our understanding of Messmer's crusade, not to mention Marika's entire character and backstory. She told him and his legions that this was a holy war for grace, for the sake of their beloved Erdtree, for the purity of their golden order. But in truth, this was a war of personal revenge. Marika was using Messmer as a tool to get revenge on the people who had destroyed her village. This is the true reason why she commanded the Crusaders to be so utterly vicious and brutal, as payback, recompense for past wrongs.
And don't get me wrong, I do think that this is a strong possibility, stronger than many others, but I'm just reticent to use such strongly factual language when FromSoft is perfectly comfortable with throwing us curveballs all the time. So, as I was joking before the DLC ever got released, I was like, we could always have another Villainy situation. We did with Messmer and Rolana. we could have another ringed city situation for all we know. Well, that's actually what kind of happened here with Belurot. Damn it, didn't think about it that way. Anyway, we might think that America could have done this for revenge, but she seems calculated enough that there's probably a reason beyond that, unless she was really that much of a galaxy brain and waited that long, which she may very well be, considering that she made some galaxy brain type 5D chess plays with the Tarnished after all. Hey Concrete Phil, how's it going? It's understandable, but I'm glad you stuck through regardless, and welcome into the stream. Appreciate it.
Messmer was lied to and manipulated, along with all of the soldiers he commanded. They were not holy warriors at all. They were merely tools in their queen's ruthless quest for vengeance. This does not absolve Messmer or his crusaders. They are still responsible for their own actions and their own choices. But how might those choices have differed if they had been told the truth? Would they still have killed so many innocents? Would the slaughter have still included even the people who had nothing to do with what happened to Marika's village? Would Messmer have agreed to command the crusade in the first place? Would so many warriors have been willing to participate? Without Marika's deception, without her wrapping her revenge in the package of a holy war, it's possible that none of this would have happened. But what about that tower shrouded in shadow? What is Messmer hiding up there? At the top of the tower lies the Gate of Divinity, a place of tremendous power, the location where Marika ascended to godhood, where Miquella plans to become a god himself. On the one hand, it is definitely practical to hide this site of power from any potential enemies. Marika would not want anyone to follow in her footsteps and become powerful enough to challenge her. On the other hand, I think Messmer is hiding something that is embarrassing to Marika here. Something she would prefer to be forgotten, lost to history. Messmer's remembrance mentions...
And so I was going to tie this back into the way that the specimen storeroom is like archiving things with history, and that's where we get the secret right scroll, which kind of tells us about the Gate of Divinity in a weird way, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But if Messmer sealed Anir Elim himself, that's perfectly fine, but it's interesting that he would have done it before he burned Belurot, just based off of the way that lower Belurot is completely scorched with his flame, whereas Anir Elim is left more or less pristine with the arguable scorched little body parts that are like falling off of some of the pillars. I don't think those pillars were burned, but I don't know exactly why you get evidence of scorching on them specifically. I have posited on the stream when we're going through the lore through whether or not the tower itself could have been made from those people, but I don't really have too strong feelings one way or another about that. And then More Lore asks, is there anything to suggest Messmer wasn't or wasn't in the know about Marika's motives for war and revenge? You always assumed he was, but you don't know now that you think about it. So, I was... do I want to wait to see if Hat Brett talks about it? Or do I jump the gun? Because we're not like halfway through yet. But you know what Simon says, the secrets beckon so sweetly. So anyway, can't let them be. So the way that I look at it is I think Messmer was holding out hope that Marika would call back and like recognize what he did for her. But once he saw the Tarnished show up and was devoid of light, he realized that he had been truly abandoned, because Marika is capable of accepting somebody without light, without grace, without all this stuff. The thing that he was born as, which she rejected by placing her seal of grace into his eye. So the fact that he was born graceless and was forced to be something that he's not, to have somebody without grace, what he should naturally have been, be embraced by his mother, may have caused him to realize the folly of his ways and curse her with his dying breath. But of course, that is heavy speculation on my part. The only other things that we have to like build off of that are the way that a couple ghosts say like Marika wouldn't abandon her children, and that all the depictions of Marika have been defaced within the realm of Shadow, with the sole exception of the statue of Marika cradling a child in the dark chamber where Messmer resides, because there's another depiction of Marika literally right outside that as you first go into Messmer's like area for the second like Shadow Keep part, the Dark Tower, I guess you want to call it. Even that depiction of Marika has been defiled or defaced. So it leads me to believe that despite his outward appearance, Messmer truly did accept that role of figurehead seriously upon Marika's behalf, but he himself may not have how do I phrase it? That he himself probably still believed in Marika, even if like his people didn't. He would be willing to go that far for his mother until, yeah. You like that reading a lot? So yeah, that's what I was saying. Why I was thinking I might want to make a video about Messmer talking about this, depending on like how good I find this one is. Because if Fat Brat gets to the same points, then I might not feel the need to make it. Like honestly, this is kind of one of the woes of content creation, because I did my lore through on stream yesterday, and as I'm like watching these videos, it feels like I'm just repeating what they're saying. But I honestly had no idea about either of these, so it is cool that we can kind of come to similar conclusions about things at times. Exactly. So yeah, going back to the whole defacing the statues of Marika, I've wondered whether or not Messmer himself, or like, I wondered whether or not he ordered his soldiers to deface them, so that way he would truly be the figurehead of the crusade as far as like it stood in the minds of his men in the Hornsent.
An original sin. The Hornsent Grandam talks about a betrayal. The Gate of Divinity itself consists of the petrified corpses of thousands upon thousands of Hornsent. I think that, in order to become a god, Marika did something very, very wrong at the top of the tower. There was a lie, a deceit, a betrayal, the slaughtering of thousands of innocents, something that would change her people's perception of her and her godhood, and so her son keeps it hidden for her. I will discuss Marika's actions at the Gate of Divinity in more detail when I do a full video on her character. For now, let's stay focused on Messmer's story. In all of his actions, from leading the crusade to destroying the Hornsent civilization to shrouding their tower in shadow, he was acting according to Marika's wishes, serving his mother's interests, doing everything for her. And how did Marika reward him for his faithful service and devotion? Well, apparently she abandoned him. According to the description of the Blessing of Marika consumable, she once created several special healing physics for her son, but never will again. A phantom in Castle Ensis pleads with Marika to embrace her child, to give them a sign to let the long holy war finally end. Another phantom in the Shadow Keep despairs, saying that it can't be true. Such a thing is utterly inconceivable. We have not been abandoned. Messmer is the son of Queen Marika. Her grace would never abandon her own flesh and blood. And yet, despite the soldier's disbelief and despite her son's victory, she never called Messmer or his armies home. In fact, the Fire Knights loyal to him were shunned and driven from their homes, never to return. The Crusaders have been forsaken by the Golden Order which sent them here in the first place. This is where the audience will begin to feel some pity for Messmer. Sure.
And just to stoke some further discussion, we also don't know when exactly the Crusades took place. I think in many ways it would make sense to happen sometime during Radagon's reign. However, there's also the possibility that Marika could have been out of her mind when she gave Messmer his orders to kill everybody. This could have been part of the directives for the Shattering, and so she might have told Messmer to do the deed, and then she might have gone back and like told the other demigod children to like war with each other or become sacrifices, and then she would further go on to shatter the ring. I don't know her frame of mind for making this order, which is why I was like, I'm not sure whether or not revenge is necessarily the answer for starting the crusade, even though I think it could be a highly likely one. Don't get me wrong. But perhaps part of the reason Messmer felt abandoned could have been just because Marika got imprisoned in her tree prison and whatnot. Okay.
He is a monster, but he is his mother's monster. He is only as foul as she wished for him to become. For her to then abandon him is cruel and unjust. We'll discuss why she abandoned her son in more detail later. For now, let's talk more about the loyalty of the Fire Knights. The Fire Knight's helm item description reads, each and every knight hailed from a renowned family of the Erdtree's upper echelons, but were shunned and chased from their homes after pledging allegiance to Messmer as their master. And the Fire Knight's armor item description reads, armor of the Fire Knights under Messmer the Impaler's personal command, distinguished by its red cape and twin golden snakes which adorn the neck. These were the only ones who truly knew Messmer, his flames like serpents, the pain.
So yeah, this, I think the fact that the Erdtree had upper echelons to begin with suggests that it couldn't have been at the very beginning of Marika's reign that the crusade happened, and it definitely must have happened later, which should be pretty self-evident with all of the Carians in the Shadowlands as well.
Fate that accompanied his accursed form. The Fire Knights were close companions of Messmer, and even though they knew his true form, his curse, his frightening serpentine nature, which according to the description of the Black Knight commander Andreas Spirit Ashes caused other loyal companions to revolt, even knowing the truth, the Fire Knights chose to stay by their leader's side.
So for anybody who may have been curious about this description like I was, when it talks about Messmer's serpentine nature, I was wondering if it was meant literally or figuratively here, and the Japanese makes it sound like it's a literal depiction of him being like a snake rather than just being snake-like. So let's go back.
Even knowing the truth, the Fire Knights chose to stay by their leader's side, at great personal cost to themselves. And the Fire Knights were not the only ones who remained loyal. There is also Rolana, the Twin Moon Knight, whose remembrance description reads, once a Carian princess, Rolana disavowed her birthright and chose to stand at Messmer's side instead, knowing full well that not even the brilliance of the moon could grant him succor. Before long, she became known as the Sword of Messmer. And then there is Commander Gaius, whose remembrance description reads, both were as elder brothers to the Lion, and both were cursed from birth. In spite of, or perhaps because of this very reason, Gaius was both Messmer's friend and the leader of his men. From each of these descriptions, we learn that Messmer was able to inspire extreme levels of loyalty and friendship in his companions.
And we were joking about this earlier on the Discord, that it's kind of ironic that Messmer says that he'll burn all who have been stripped of the grace of gold, and they'll all die in the flames of, like, Messmer's. They'll all be embraced in the flames of whatever he says. They'll die in his flames. They'll be embraced, but better. Because Gaius doesn't have gold because he's an Albinoric. Miquella literally divests his golden flesh to go to Anir Lim, and Messmer doesn't care. It's only when he sees the Tarnished that he's like, nah, it's on sight. You ain't gold enough around here. But I mean, he's just fine chilling with his big bro Gaius and his little bro Miquella. I almost had it. It's one of those moments. Anyway.
Many different people from diverse backgrounds chose to follow him no matter the personal cost. In this, I think Messmer is meant to be a direct foil to Miquella. Miquella is also able...
Alright, I gotta respect the true and real of leaving one's death runes there for the footage purposes.
I think Messmer is meant to be a direct foil to Miquella. Miquella is also able to inspire extreme loyalty in followers from a very diverse set of backgrounds, but he does so through magical charms. He essentially brainwashes his followers, and as soon as his charm is broken, they start killing each other. Messmer inspires the same kind of loyalty, but without any magical charms. There is something about his character that people choose to follow, to believe in, to stand beside. But let's return to that description of Black Knight Commander Andreas's Spirit Ashes. It reads, "The Black Knights were the primary force of Messmer's army. Their leader was Andreas, a man endowed with great strength and command over the powers of the Crucible. Though he remained a devout follower of Messmer after his flight from the Erdtree, he would rebel after learning of his liege's serpentine nature.
I'm going to make a note to fight Andreas again, because I think I normally stalk those Black Knights. I mean, I've only done it like twice. Because Andreas doesn't give... Wait, where do we get the Andreas ones? We get that one from the Catacombs, don't we? He doesn't have Crucible powers, does he? I know the dude in the place has it. Hold on. Not Fort Reprimand, but the one next to Rolana's castle, Ensis. He has Crucible stuff. I don't remember if there's any Crucible stuff from the Catacomb dudes, is all. Matthew Sargent, nice to see you again. Perhaps he thought they were abandoned because of his acceptance of graceless creatures, and seeing a graceless creature allied with Marika makes him see her as a hypocrite. Yeah, that's kind of what I think makes the most sense to me, that there's something different about us being accepted by Marika, which sets him over the edge, as opposed to like the Albinorics. Although I think the Miquella situation is still a bit strange. But at least Miquella is a demigod, so he had gold, but maybe he's going to go pick it back up after he becomes a god. He does have the tongue? Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't think I've fought him long enough to use that. I'll need to go back.
His righteous stand was rewarded with imprisonment in an underground tomb, and the description of the Black Knight Captain Hugh Spirit Ashes read, second to their first Knight Commander was Hugh, a man with agile command of both twin blade techniques and the powers of the Crucible. Though a champion of the Divine Beast Hunt, he followed his father Andreas into rebellion against Messmer, and like his father, he too was imprisoned in an underground tomb. Messmer mourned the loss of a brother in arms. And Messmer's remembrance description states, a malevolent snake writhed within Messmer, and so his very mother plucked out his eye and put in its place a seal of grace. Yet having done so, her fear compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow. When you put all of these together, along with the fact that the Fire Knights were also driven from their home afterwards, it becomes clear that Messmer was born cursed, and because of this curse, he had to be sent away. The people of the lands between must have reviled him. The nature of this curse caused some of his closest brothers-in-arms, like Captain Hugh, to revolt against him, even as others chose to remain by his side. And Messmer is not the only child of Marika to be born cursed. Morgott, Moog, Miquella, Melania, and even Melina were all born with different curses too. In fiction, cursed children are a symbol of the parents' sins.
Yeah, I was going to bring up something like that. So if Messmer was born cursed, then it should suggest that he may have been born after the Erdtree arose, because that's like the first big sin. And so maybe that could also imply that's when the Omen children were born, and that might help canonize potentially Godwin being the first child of them all, the true golden child of the golden lineage. But, you know, that's all speculation and ready to be thrown out the window as soon as we get that DLC 2, Deathblight Boogaloo. He's her own son, and he was tossed away like a dirty secret. Meanwhile, an entire people of nobodies get to potential decide the fate of the world while hunting down the demigods. Man's pissed. I don't blame him. Yeah. Alright, let's go back in.
America's wrongdoings and flaws are represented by the cursed nature of so many of her offspring. So much that is wrong in Messmer's story can be traced back to her. Returning to Commander Gaius's remembrance, it states that Messmer was an elder brother to the Lion, most likely referring to Radahn. This means that Messmer was a mentor, probably even a friend to Radahn, who we know was a pretty cool guy. Everyone in the lore seems to look up to Radahn, and at one point in his life, Radahn looked up to Messmer. This makes it seem that if Messmer's life had followed a different path, if his mother had not abandoned him or lied to him, Messmer's story could have been very different. He could have been an inspiring or even heroic figure in the lands between. If
Yeah, I was muted. Thank you guys. So, what's his face? Oh yeah, Matthew brings up a really good question of, does Radagon's children lacking curses imply that he didn't sin? And so my response might be a little bit of a mind screw for you guys, but if the Karian children are not born because of like sin and whatnot, it may be because Radagon took celestial dew absolution in the Church of Vows and washed himself away of all those sins. But, you know, we don't entirely know why they're all different. But good question, though. And the Night Scout, nice to see again. Something else to consider is that the Tarnished had their grace stripped away as though they did something horribly wrong. As such, a horrible sinner can be Elden Lord and Messmer's to die. No wonder Messmer's emotionally hurt in ways that he couldn't imagine and is livid. It feels bad because he goes so long for holding out hope, only to go down the gutter.
only they had been more accepting of him, but that was not to be. This is the point in the analysis when we reach the ultimate confrontation, when Messmer finally appears on screen. We fight our way to the very top of the Shadow Keep where we reach Messmer's throne room, which is surprisingly dark for a supposed champion of the Erdtree's Golden Order. There is no shining golden light anywhere to be found in this arena. Messmer spends all of his time brooding in the dark. Now, let's watch the cutscene that plays inside, and ask yourself, how is Messmer's character being portrayed here? Okay, here it is.
Okay, here it is.
Mongrel intruder.
I still like the other voice lines better.
That tarnished, it seemeth. Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light? Yet, my purpose standeth unchanged. Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death. In the embrace of Messmer's flame.
The cutscene begins with Messmer playing his stereotypical villain role. He says in a commanding but also kind of bored voice, "Mongrel intruder." But then his delivery softens. You can hear surprise in his voice when he recognizes the player character as a Tarnished. From the rest of his dialogue, it becomes clear that he believes the Tarnished was sent by Marika, who he is still calling Mother, though that will soon change. He is shocked that Marika would allow a Tarnished, someone stripped of grace, to become the next Elden Lord. The whole point of Messmer's crusade was, supposedly, as commanded by Marika, to purge the impure. And now it turns out that a supposedly impure person is being allowed the highest position in the Golden Order, but he chooses not to question it. He decides, my purpose, given to me by my mother, is to kill anyone without grace. So that's what I'm still going to do, regardless of how circumstances have changed. I will not betray my mother's commandments.
I don't think he'll go into the Japanese of this, but I think this is also a bit of interesting, like, contextual evidence to look at Messmer's lines here. So when he refers to Mother as America, he does say haha, which is, it's kind of funny to say that like in an English way. Pun intended, I guess. Haha means mother, but more importantly, by just saying like haha, it's pretty clear that it's done with a form of familiarity in a way that there's kind of like a personal connection to it. And this should sound like fairly obvious, like, okay, yeah, it's your mother. But just to give a bit of contrasting take on things, when Sephiroth refers to Genova, he calls her Okasa-san. So let's see if we can show off the difference. So Okasa-san is a more I don't want to say like honorable way to refer to mother, but this isn't the way that one refers to their own mother. Like you use humble language to refer to your own mother rather than like honorifics. So that shows that there's an impersonal relationship between Sephiroth and his mother, which is definitely true because he never knew her. Whereas Messmer, by using the more informal haha, has more of a relationship, is what we can take away from his dialogue here, which might not come across as well in English. I don't know how you guys feel about that, whether you can confirm about your interpretations of him referring to America. Well, I guess mother, yeah, mother is... I don't want to get into the semantics of like the differences between mother, ma, and mom, because they don't really lay super well on to the way like Japanese uses their terminology, but it's kind of similar in principle, that if somebody calls their own mom mother in English, I don't know about you guys, but for me that like raises like a red flag. It's like a static jolt goes through the body, like, ugh, that family is weird if their child refers to their mother as mother. It's like the whole Psycho film, literally the movie titled Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, where yes, mother. Oh, and we got the British mum. Indeed, that's a good one. Messmer saying mommy would be weird. Yeah, it's not quite to that level. So just wanted to point that out. Do I call how Melina says mother? I do not, actually. Born at the foot of the Erdtree. Born of a mother. No. My mother. My own will. Oh, that's Fia's line. I found her dialogue. I just need to find where she calls her mother. The thing is, I can't just like look up mother, because that'll bring up like all the other ones. Okay, she also calls her haha. Haha no ishi. Which is kind of interesting because I probably need to do a deeper dive into all of her text, because that line comes after she's already visited the Erdtree. But I don't remember if she references her mother before that. So when she talks about Bach's mother, she says Okasama, which is even like more honorific than like Okasan, which was like what Sephiroth does. So it's kind of over the top, but I mean, she's she just says in America's own words rather than I'm gonna spend a little bit more time to see if she says mother. Yeah, I don't think she says it before that. Oh, wait. For my purpose, give it to me by my mother inside the Erdtree. Okay, it's still ha. It feels weird and wrong saying it with like such an English accent. It suggests a great deal of removal or formalism if they go with mother. Yes. Messmer speaks old, formal English. Mother is the right word choice, in your opinion. The rest of the sentiment can be conveyed by his acting. Right, I'm not trying to say, like, going with mother was a wrong choice. I was just trying to say that there's no, like, equivalent way to impress upon us that he's a bit more familiar with his mother as America than might be suggested. And then, grown up, welcome on into the stream. Do I think Messmer was stolen by America with the abductor virgins? Probably not. Yeah, Night Scott says the statue behind Messmer also already conveys that personal connection, and it's the one that it's the one America statue that isn't vandalized. The feelings are still clear even if he says mother in the English text. I wasn't trying to say that it's too distant. I'm just trying to say that it doesn't. We don't have as many layers to make it as clear, though. So, if anything, like the Japanese gives us more of a personal connection between him rather than like the statue thing alone, to show that he really did believe in America up until like his dying breath when he eventually curses her. So, feels bad, man. And what's new, boys? Not much. How about you? Welcome on in. You never found the grace or Melina gave the Bach dialogue? It is in the East Ryalocarian Bridge Site of Grace. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's the one to the south of the Bellum Church. The one with the finger reader crone. And the Knight Rider between, well, like on the way to Bellum Church. Oh, no, that's when she says she sees them crying. I don't remember off the top of my head where the mother one happens. I think I got my footage of it on the Altus Plateau in the abandoned coffin side of Grace, but yeah. Yeah, I said that when Melina talks about Bach's mother, it's Oka-sama. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. I'm going to back it up because I don't remember what he was saying exactly.
Is not to question it. He decides my purpose, given to me by my mother, is to kill anyone without grace. So that's what I'm still going to do, regardless of how circumstances have changed. I will not betray my mother's commandments. The purpose she gave to me, no matter how foul. At the beginning of that scene, we also immediately see Messmer's close association with serpents, but I'll discuss that more in the next scene. And so the battle commences, and when you get Messmer's health low enough, a second cutscene plays. In this one, we finally see the nature of his curse, so here it is.
I was just thinking about how dog-like that snake looked when he's got the close-up going on.
I will not suffer. A lord devoid of light. No, mother. Forgive me. soon tarnished. Wilt thou be taken in the jaws of the abyssal serpent, shorn of light?
Here it is revealed that there is a fundamental hypocrisy in Messmer's crusade. He has spent a lifetime slaughtering those deemed impure by the Golden Order, but he himself was hiding an even greater, even more hideous impurity deep inside his body all along.
So, to pause and talk a bit more about, semantic differences. So, shorn of light, maybe you guys feel differently about that, but the impression that I get from this dialogue specifically, it would imply that he had light to be shorn of, whereas the Japanese is a little bit different, where it's just more like the snake of the lightless abyss, essentially. So, hikari naki means like lightless, rather than something having been done to his light to make him be shorn of it. So, that might be worth noting. That was your dog? It's okay. Glad you guys are interested in all those semantics, because sometimes I think it could be a little bit much and just could be a little bit time consuming. Dylan says, my read is that he chooses America's orders and is proud over accepting the tarnished as part of his mother's plan. You do really like that reading? It makes a lot of sense, as him unleashing the serpent must be huge America no. Hold on, let me reread what you said. So I think it's the opposite case, that he originally accepted America's orders and he was acting on her behalf. And then when he meets us and realizes that being lightless is something that America can accept, because he was originally lightless, it shows that she doesn't accept him for something else, something perhaps more intrinsic to him, rather than just like lacking light, because he finally sees somebody that also lacks light but is accepted by his mother, whereas he's doing all of this to potentially gain his mother's approval, and she is the one who treats him like a mongrel dog, not worthy of a place by her side. Which I don't really know how well this maps onto the whole Miquella experience, getting rid of his body. Maybe we could chalk it up to just poor writing, but I try to avoid saying that as much as possible about this stuff, even though like my channel is focused on it. I do like to be a little bit more realistic and honest with myself about that stuff if I can. So, all right. We're also told by his helmet's description that when he breaks his eye, he and his serpents are accepting his fate. So what Marika did to him denied him of his own fate, and so he's going back into like his natural form, and that's why he's opposing us, because he's kind of broken himself free of Marika's control, but he still cannot accept the situation for what it is, which is why he remains aggro, is kind of my read. And obviously, people are free to disagree. Okay, cool. Thank you, Dylan. Do you think shorn is similar to bereft in meaning for this scenario, ironically? Maybe you're right. I don't know if there's like an archaic definition. Cut the wool off, break off of a cause, or break off. Well, see, the difference is like shorn is transitive, whereas like lightless is intransitive, and that's like the biggest difference. And for anybody who may not know or may not entirely remember the difference between like intransitive and transitive, so a transitive verb means an action is taken upon something else, whereas intransitive means that it's just something that kind of arises naturally. So for example, we can use the word gather in both a transitive and intransitive context, which Japanese distinguishes a lot more clearly than the English does. So if we say gather your things before you go, that means you act upon your things to gather them, and that's a transitive action. Whereas intransitive would be something like the people gathered at the funeral. So there is still an action being taken, but there's no agent that's being acted upon, which makes it an intransitive act, which is why I was being pedantic about the whole like being shorn of light, in case people were thinking that what may have happened to Messmer might have been like what happened to the Tarnished being shorn or bereft of light. Is Messmer why we have to kill Radahn to get the stars and thus fate moving again? I'm not sure I entirely understand your question, but we need to kill a Messmer to burn the sealing tree so that way we can go into Anir Elim and follow Miquella on his path. Yeah, Messmer's reading the writing on the wall of being abandoned and left in the dark. Which is kind of ironic because, like, Marika tells all of her demigod children to make something of themselves, and Messmer kind of does that by following her crusade, but he also doesn't, because he doesn't do it for himself. He doesn't follow his own will, he's following the will of somebody else, which is why he becomes a sacrifice to us, I guess, thematically speaking here. The consequence of breaking the prosthetic eye is to be tormented by the abyssal serpent or taken over by it, but at that point, Messmer just wants to stop a Tarnished from becoming Elden Lord. So I think the reason why he was being tormented by that serpent originally was because it's literally part of himself that's being repressed, like literally and figuratively here. And so I think the whole act of breaking his prosthetic eye and accepting his fate is also accepting himself for what he is, and that's why the fight progresses as it does. This is why you think Messmer is someone else's kid? Well, unfortunately, we are told that he is Marika's child, I think in an item description too. So, if you think he has a different dad or a different mother situation, and like Radagon's his dad, well, the mother stuff doesn't work out because he does say like Marika's his mother. At least from his own mouth, his own words, he believes he's Marika's child. Or was it one of his set items which talks about it? Anyway. What's new, boys? How did Miquella reach the gate of divinity if it was sealed? So his little NPC followers point out that because he's an Empyrean, he's able to reach it. He's also been divesting himself of his flesh, so that might have something to do with it, but he's got that special god magic, which we don't have. Grown Up says, item descriptions have propaganda, though. You're not entirely wrong. However, when there is propaganda, it's usually written in such a way as to be clear that it's not factual language being used. And the biggest problem with saying that any item description is propaganda is that you open yourself to criticism that literally any piece of item description is propaganda and can be discarded, which makes it extremely difficult to talk in good faith about what facts are actually relevant to the lore on a given topic. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the video.
He was born with a base serpent rooted deep inside his flesh, entwined with his very soul, impossible to remove. That is the true nature of his curse. So let's talk about the symbolism of serpents in fiction. Snakes are almost always meant to represent something negative, something foul, but exactly what they are representing changes depending on the context. What I'm trying to explain is that the serpent inside Messmer's body is symbolizing something different than the serpent that devoured Rykard. These are two different stories using the same kind of symbol to represent two different ideas. Rykard's serpent, more than anything else, symbolized greed, a serpent that devoured more and more and more, growing larger and larger and larger, until one day it would devour the entire world. Rykard's submission to the serpent was a form of blasphemy, a rebellion against the greater will in the Golden Order, against everything they had declared divine. Messmer's serpent is something very different.
Which is ironic as hell to me, because it almost seems as though Rykard's path to blasphemy is the exact same one that was taken by the gods on their path to divinity. So, I mean, that might even be textual to some degrees, because we're told of like the original sin and all of this other stuff. But anyway, I will let him get back to his points, and if he doesn't bring things up, I will address the the winged nature of these serpents. So I'm going to go ahead and make a note on screen.
Different. I think his serpent represents most of all sin, and not Messmer's sin, but Marika's sin. Her wrongdoing, reborn as a curse in her son's body. If you look closely at his visual design in his second phase, you can see the shape of a serpent bulging in the flesh of his arms and legs. You could actually see hints of it in the previous phase too. Throughout the battle, he actually transforms into a serpent during his attacks. The serpent is so deep inside him that he practically is a serpent. This should be a very familiar sort of development to the audience by this point. We've seen...
You know, I didn't realize that even the serpent's left eye is closed. That's interesting. Is that like a Melina thing? She has a normal looking right, like a normal tarnished looking right eye, because it's like a bright gold. Doesn't have like the Marika rune arc. Oh. Could that be why? Well, hold on. I would need to double check the text, because this is a possibility of me just crossing wires right now. But I was wondering if part of the reason why Messmer was cursed was because of like the scar seal situation, where Marika and Radagon would use their sword seals and scar seals to make people perform their duties. I don't get that vibe entirely from that, and I think the curse is implied to be his snake, because I think it was said that he was born cursed. But maybe there's an extra layer to things here to consider. Okay.
This happened before. For example, during our battle with Morgott, when we force him to reveal his omen-cursed blood, or during our battle with Melania, when we force her to embrace the scarlet rot and her body is transformed. Actually, Melania's face after her transformation is very similar in design to Messmer's after he is burned by his own flame. They are both left blind. It is also similar to when Godfrey kills Sarosh, casts off his noble lordly exterior, and embraces his true identity as the barbarian Horalu. Elden Ring is full of characters hiding who they really are, their true selves, in order to fit into the rigid expectations of the Golden Order. Messmer is not unique by doing this, but he is perhaps unique in his motivation. He is hiding who he truly is specifically to please his mother, to be the child she wants him to be. After all, she was the one that placed that sealing eye in his skull to obscure the serpent within. Look at his dialogue in this scene, how he speaks to Marika. He still calls her mother. He apologizes to her before removing the seal, before revealing his true self, as if he is embarrassing her or disappointing her. He is still doing everything for her, even now. I think there is an element of deep self-hatred in Messmer's dialogue. He will not suffer a lord devoid of light, but he is literally a lord devoid of light. He will burn those stripped of grace, but he just stripped himself of grace, if he ever truly possessed any to begin with. This is similar to Morgott's self-hatred. He loathed his cursed omen blood. The Golden Order has caused these characters to believe that their true selves are base and wrong, deserving of persecution. Because they are true believers in the Golden Order's hierarchy, they must also truly believe in their own lack of worth in that hierarchy. It's no wonder they are both such angry and miserable characters. Next, let's talk about Messmer's flame. Flames are similar to serpents in that they can be used by writers to represent many different and even conflicting ideas. There are like a dozen different flames throughout the story of Elden Ring, from the Giant's Flame of Ruin, to the Ghost Flame of the Dead, to the Black Flame of the Godskin Apostles, and they all represent different ideas. What I'm trying to explain here is that Messmer's flame is unique. He is not wielding the flame of the giants or anyone else. This is a new flame, a new symbol meant to represent something else.
All right, so before going down that road too much further, I wanted to go back to the whole idea of winged serpents and wingless ones. So I definitely agree with Fat Brett here that snakes are often used to represent certain tropes within literature, folklore, mythology, religion, what have you, and that there is a significant difference between the way that winged serpents are depicted and ground-based serpents are depicted, in that winged serpents are often affiliated with dragons, and they represent mastery of both land and sky/heaven, because they aren't terrestrially bound to the world to like crawl on their bellies. Whereas in many cultures and societies, snakes are affiliated with I wasn't going to say death, but like rebirth, essentially. Immortality, which you can kind of see with Rykard, because they shed their skin and they're like reborn, kind of like the moon. So in many cultures, they're affiliated with the moon. Another thing about the serpents is because they don't have legs, you can see that they're like forced to crawl on their bellies. So it could be symbolic of a type of sin that they may have committed, or a punishment that has been doled upon them, which might pertain to the Rykard stuff more specifically. Whereas it's interesting that Messmer's serpents are winged and not terrestrially bound, so that might show that they were kind of ordained or like chosen by the god of the land to a degree. But it is also interesting that they're also not depicted to be like dragons, so they are this kind of interesting in-between where they are not quite divine, but also not quite profane, which is probably a decent descriptor of Messmer's place in the hierarchy of the lands between, or the Shadow Realm, whichever you want to call them. So Phantom Leaves, nice to see you again. It's interesting that it said that he hated his flame and that the serpent eats away at his flame. It seems like he didn't hate the abyssal serpent, but accepted Marika's repression of it out of love for her. Yeah, that's kind of my read on it too. And thinking about this a bit more, I was going to bring this up, but I'm glad you brought your comment up, because that, helped bring it back to mind, in that I was saying I don't think Messmer's flame would have been the flame of ruin, but what if it is, to a degree? I don't like that, because we're told that the flame of ruin is sealed with like the last fire giant and whatnot. So I don't fully buy this theory that I'm about to posit, but I think there's might be something to it regardless, in that somebody else had also brought up that the shape of the abyssal serpent in his eye kind of looks like the coils in his flame, and that might be because they might represent the literal darkness in the flame. So the dark might come from the snakes because they are of like the lightless abyss, essentially, and the flame might be something extraneous to Messmer originally, and it might have been sealed in him similar to the way that Destined Death was sealed in Malekith, perhaps. Maybe not like the Malekith thing literally because of the eye and whatnot, but thematically, taking a certain kind of flame and sealing it away so that way nobody could burn the Erdtree wouldn't be the first or even the second time Marika may have done something like that. So maybe multiple flames are capable of doing it in the past, which is cool, I guess. And so, yeah, because that flame is extraneous to Messmer. That might explain why the Abyssal Serpent was eating it, and might also explain why he tried to give his flame to other people. But maybe that's why he couldn't, because it was literally placed in there by Marika. And that makes me wonder if flame is tied to grace, if that theory holds water, but I don't know about that. Night Scott thinks Messmer hates both flame and Abyssal Serpent, but the Abyssal Serpent is only there because it wants his flame. But yeah, it is also interesting that the snakes use the flame, so I don't know how I feel about that idea that I was positing a moment ago. Operator was asking if the Japanese is different and the word omen is used in her dialogue versus the omens. Someone said they think it was, but you don't remember if we clarified. Who is she that you're referring to here? Are you talking about the Hornsent grandma? Because it's a little bit complicated, and I should make a dedicated video about it. But the difference is that omen isn't exactly a proper noun in the way that it's used in Japanese. The way that it works is that, let's say you have the character for ogre or oni, for example, and right before that character, they put an adjective. So let's do it this way. So the curse of the omen shall strike thee down. So as far as this is concerned, in English, omen here is a noun, even disregarding the fact that it has to be a noun because it's part of a preposition. If you placed it over here, like the omen curse shall strike thee down, that would make a lot more sense and be more preferable to the way that it's used in, well, no, even this wouldn't be good because omen is a specific thing in English. So yeah, this just ties back into it not being a proper noun in Japanese. So let's find another case of omen here. I'm going to copy this just to show you guys that the fell omen. Okay, this is perfect. I mean, these are going to be too small. It'll be good enough. So the first three characters are literally how they are described as being omen in Japanese. So Imi is like kind of like abominable, and Imawashi, right, is like a different way of saying it, but is essentially the same thing. The difference is kind of semantically hard to describe. Like, this is an adjective, but it can stand alone kind of like a noun, but this is an adjective modifying another noun, so that's kind of the difference. So if you want to say that this is the omen, it's that they're like ogres. So these are like terrible ogres, essentially. So the hands of this terrible ogre shall brook thee no quarter, blah, 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 versus the let there be an abominable, or let there be a terrible curse, if we're going to stick with calling it terrible. So even though these are technically different phrasings, the idea could still be there that it's supposed to represent the omen as a group, because that's how they are kind of referred to here, but it's ambiguous. So it's not as clear as the English makes it. What is Messmer's kindling in Japanese? I don't remember the word order, but he's just called like tanebi, which is like Messmer's embers, essentially, or like Messmer's coal. Or what's the other word? No, kindling. Kindling is perfectly fine. That's how they talk about it in Dark Souls and whatnot. And Herman Art Studios, welcome on in. And welcome in from Ukraine. And Realist says, doesn't the flame have strange reincarnation abilities? Not exactly. So they give life to soulless bodies, but it's more like making a puppet dance on strings. They don't really get life, is kind of the takeaway from that one there. The form of the sacred beast's ire in regard to Japanese. Let me look at that. Let me see what you're saying. The form of the sacred beast's ire. Let me just copy this. Sort of. Oh, it's the exact same thing. Oh, okay. I see what you're asking now. So as far as this is concerned, she's saying, like, let there be a terrible curse, the holy beast's rage. So like, the way that Japanese works is that they often use like fragments of sentences because the context kind of like fills in the gaps here. So if I were to literally break this down, she's saying like, let there be a terrible curse. Let there be the divine beast's rage or wrath. The wrath is probably a better way to say that in this context. So in other contexts, ire can be used to describe curses. So it kind of all fits together that way. And what I mean by that in other contexts in FromSoft games, ire is synonymous with curses, but not like literally in Japanese in general. Okay, we gotta continue on. So let's go in. Oh, only 5 minutes left. Okay.
This is a flame of violence, of destruction, of warfare, of misery and suffering, of hatred, of all those things America inflicted on her enemies, now being inflicted upon her in the form of her child. Instead of confronting this curse, a symbol of her own sins, she chose to hide it, to turn it against her old enemies, and then to abandon it. When you finally defeat Messmer, listen to what he says.
Mother. America, a curse upon thee.
First, he calls out to his mother, but then he catches himself. He changes his mind. For the first time, he refers to her as Marika. And by doing this, he disowns his familial connection to her in the same way that she has disowned him. In his final words, he curses her. If you look behind Messmer's throne, you can see this statue that he chose to keep close to him at all times. It depicts Queen Marika holding an infant, symbolizing her love for her children. It is important to note that this is one of the only statues of Queen Marika in the Realm of Shadow that has not been beheaded. At first, I assumed it was the Hornsent who were doing this, which makes sense, of course they despise her. But then I noticed that even the statues in Messmer's own camps and fortresses have been defaced too. I think this is representative of the Crusaders' anger towards their queen. But Messmer held on to this one. He kept it close. He did not allow it to be defaced. I think he wanted to hold on to that idea of motherly love, to this idea that his mother still cared about him. But in his last moments, he finally lets go of that hope, finally accepts the fact that he has been left to waste away and die alone. And that is why he curses his mother with his last breath. Taken as a whole, I think Messmer is one of the most complex antagonists From Software have ever constructed. On the one hand, he is absolutely...
So yeah, I actually really liked the point that he made there, that he goes from referring to Marika as mother to Marika, which does show a bit of a difference in address right before he curses her. So I think that's a great observation there. And then just to close off with a bit of what Operator was asking about a moment ago with the ire, because I think this might be what she's getting at, even though she didn't like bring it up directly. And this will tie back into what the video is saying there at the end there. And part of the reason why I think, and why Fat Brett seems to think that the situation wasn't, that Messmer wasn't entirely privy to it, or that like that. Hold on, let me try to rephrase this. That I think all the defacing of Marika's statues may have been done by Messmer on purpose, partially because that might have been the directive that he was given. And in his armor set, it says that on his mother's wishes, Messmer made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she desired, which Fat Brett did bring up way earlier in the video. And also I talked a lot over it, so that was much longer ago. Anyway, quote, "Direct thy maledictions, thine ire, and thy grief towards me alone." So as far as the Japanese goes, the portion where it's called like thine ire. So we have Juso, which is like a curse that somebody like offers while they die, essentially. Then we also have like, I guess you could say this is maledictions. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. So maledictions is supposed to correlate to Juso here, and maybe ire. No, this is grief. Wait. Okay, so ire is just added, which is fine. It's for flavor. And then Nageki is like lamentation, which is where we get the grief. And this is the same Nageki that's used for the lamenter. So direct thy curses and thy lamentation towards me alone, or like blame me alone, essentially for, yeah. Blame your curses and lamentation on me alone. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. So he is certainly acting as not only a figurehead, but like a shield for Marika, which is kind of what a figurehead is, but just to drive home that point a little bit further there. So hopefully that goes back into what you were asking about a moment ago. And Dylan is coming away with the realist moral of the story that if your mom asks you to go to do genocide, don't do it. True and real. Okay.
Absolutely a monster. He is a murderer. He is a hypocrite. He cannot be absolved of those crimes, no matter how tragic his personal story. But on the other hand, there are all these hints of something noble and honorable within him.
I don't know if he's a hypocrite. I would need to think about that a bit more. I think he's a bit of a complex character despite everything, so nonetheless, I kind of agree with the overall points of this video.
Preservation of cultural and historical knowledge in the storeroom. The incredible loyalty he inspired in such a diverse cast of characters who were willing to make sacrifices on his behalf. His relationship with General Radahn, his devotion to his mother. In the end, it becomes clear that the true villain in Messmer's story is not Messmer himself, but Queen Marika. His curse is her curse, and because she could not face that, she cast him away, lied to him, manipulated him, and finally abandoned him to his fate without...
And this is why it's so unfortunate that the one item says that Marika hid him away out of fear in English, when that mentioning of fear was not present in the Japanese at all. I'm pretty sure that's his remembrance, actually. And I have a short video on that on my channel if anybody wants to look at that. A malevolent snake writhed within Messmer, and so his very mother plucked out his eye and put in its place a seal of grace. Yet having done so, her fear compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow. Oh yes, I put my translation here. A wicked snake writhed within Messmer. His mother replaced his eye with a sealing grace, yet nevertheless hid him within shadow. So there's nothing relating to being compelled by fear to get rid of Messmer, which places a completely different read on their relationship, in my opinion. So, yeah, if I ever do a deeper dive on the Messmer thing, this would probably be something to point out in conjunction with all of the other descriptions and whatnot. He's lightless and goes on about having to kill the lightless. Well, he's been given grace, so I don't think he's a hypocrite. He's following orders, just kind of like we are in a way. And he kind of eventually goes out of it So he eventually kind of follows America's ethos at the very end. So I don't know if I'd actually consider that truly hypocritical or not. You thought the storehouse was established on some of his knight's initiative and he just conceded? That is true as well, is it? Yet it's Hilda and her spirit ashes. Well, she just wants to be the guardian. At the very least, Salza was like, nah, we don't need to burn these empty ruins, apparently, but you might have a point with that, too. You can find various Shadow Realm runes on Hornsent bodies, so the Hornsent might have had grace once, but Marika took it, in that sense losing grace is their punishment. Maybe, and that might tie into that idea I floated earlier in stream. I don't think you were here at that point, Night Scout. That what if Marika decided to betray the Hornsent as a way to stave off the ending of the Age of Abundance? Not hypocrites if they're self-loathing? Maybe. Well, yeah, I'll just stick with the maybe. In contrast, Messmer was born cursed, so his state of being wasn't a punishment for any sins of his own. That's a good takeaway there.
Without her deceit or her zealotry, Messmer might have lived a noble life. He could have been an inspiring leader of the lands between. He may have held the strength to become the next lord of this land, and if so, I think he would have ruled with dignity. To end this video, I want to take another look at the description for Messmer's armor, because it includes this quotation: "Direct thy maledictions, thine ire, and thy grief towards me alone." He chose to accept all the blame, all the anger, all the sorrow for Marika's crusade, to direct it all towards himself, perhaps an even more corrosive rot than the one which infected Melania, and he chose to serve as a barrier between his mother and all those who hated her. And what did she ever do for him in return? Queen Marika has long seemed an ambivalent and obscure figure to me. It has been challenging to pin down her motivations, how much she is to blame for the miseries and curses which infested her golden kingdom. But after all this, she has never looked worse. I have never been more certain that Queen Marika, not the Greater Will, not the 2 or 3 Fingers, not Radigan, not any of their children, not any of the other outer gods, that she is the true villain of this story. Not because she is evil, but because of her failures as a leader and as a mother. And I will fully examine her story eventually, but not yet. For my next video, I will examine the other major antagonist of Shadow of the Erdtree.
Teen Sith fuming if she's still awake right now, which I don't think she is. So anyway, about the whole Marika thing, I think it's really easy to overlook the whole Jarcent situation. Well, I mean, maybe not easy. I want to say it's a little bit ironic to bring up the whole Jarcent situation as justification for her actions, as well as like condemning her out of the other side of one's mouth. But that's kind of one of the interesting things about her. She is a complex character. I will always lament that we don't ever really get more of the character's motivations and interests for why they're going about doing what they're doing. And Marika, more than any, is by far like the most enigmatic figure. Even with all like the Miquella stuff before the DLC dropped. Not that like the DLCs really made him any better. But anyway, oh, yeah. I think the most important aspect to point about Marika, to try to give her some redeeming qualities, is that the minor Erdtree incantation is the kindness of gold. So it's not as though she's a purely psychopathic, sociopathic narcissist that will use anybody and everybody and anybody to accomplish her goals. I mean, she might, but there is another layer of depth which is underexplored, not by default of any like lore theorist, as much as it is underexplored because the game has left it underexplored. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Marika's complex, but God, she does terrible things. Well, in order to make an omelet, you first need to create the universe and then take control of the Universal's will's dog, apparently. And so, yeah, as Night Scout was bringing up about the mistreatment of Messmer and the massacres are unrelated, the other thing that I want to say is we don't actually know, again, whether or not the Crusades happened right before she did the Shattering, and whether or not that had any impact on her psyche and decision to do what she did with Messmer. But I think that's an interesting and potentially acceptable spin on things. I don't want to say like it's morally acceptable to do a genocide because you're a sad girl, but there might be layers here. Okay.
A character who is, in many ways, a foil to not only Messmer, but to Queen Marika as well. Next time, we are going to look at Miquella the Kind, and the world he tries to establish to supplant his mother's.
Okay, so that was a good video. Obviously, I have some like minor disagreements here and there are some like linguistic things which I'm not going to blame Fat Brett for not getting into, but I am impressed that he went into the whole Miko aspect. When was this made exactly? I know this is one of the earlier videos that were suggested to me. July 1st, so more or less like 10-11 days after the game release, which is holy crap, man. How the hell do y'all produce content so quickly? 41-minute video in 10 days of even like playing through the DLC, getting all the HUD-less free cam footage. That's kind of crazy, not gonna lie. Probably got a team, maybe not, maybe he's just that good. Anyway, yeah, that's a good video. I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, I did already share it in the chat with you guys. If you want to give Fat Brett a like and or a subscribe. I think that's my first video by them that I've watched. Maybe there's another one somewhere. I'm going to see what else they have.
Caelid is one of the most...
Why is this cut off? Oh, it's because it's the For You section. Deconstruction of Villainy. Sounds cool. Okay, we'll go ahead and give them a sub. And the Reggie PFP. Where's Mother 3, Reggie? Renala got screwed over horribly too, and Merrick apparently never hated mages, and people slightly aligned with the Nox enough to do anything like a purge to them. What happened to Renala wasn't because she was seen as a supporter of some Nox who hurt Merrick. Renala was just an incidental person. Well, to be fair, I mean, America did wage war against Renala to begin with, too. So maybe that's not entirely fair, but yeah, definitely a lot of warmongering going on with the warmonger or warlord god. So, okay, everybody. That'll be it for tonight's stream. We will continue tomorrow with more reaction videos at the same time of 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So technically today. But anyway, that'll be it for me for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. So until then, take care. Stay safe. That's Protagonist out.